significance, and the traveller must be careful how he trusts to the phrase "Nanimalihin we are bound together by the salt." FN number 287, Arab. Alama equals alama equals upon what? Wherefore? FN number 288, Arab. Moors, hence the Linnean name Musa, Paradisiaca, etc. The word is explained by Sale, Quran, chaps. 37. 146, as a small tree or shrub, and he would identify it with Jonah's gourd. FN number 289, Lane, 2. 446, Bold Wolf or Empowered Fate, reading, with Mac, Kaza for Catan, cat. FN number 290, that is the orthodox in the faith. Rashid is a proper name, witness that scourge of Syria, Rashid Pasha. Born in 1830, of the Haji Naziraga family, Darabes of Macedonian reigner, he was educated in Paris where he learned the usual hatred of Europeans. He entered the Egyptian service in 1851, and, presently exchanging it for the Turkish, became in due time Wali, Governor-General, of Syria, which he plundered most shamelessly. Recalled in 1872, he eventually entered the ministry and on June 15, 1876, he was shot down, with other villains like himself, by gallant Captain Hassan, the Circassian, Yarhamullah. FN number 291, quoted from a piece of verse, of which more presently. FN number 292, this tetrastich has occurred before, Night Xi. I quote Lane, 2. 449, who quotes Dryden's Spanish friar. There is a pleasure sure in being mad which none but madmen know. FN number 293, Lane, 2. 449, gives a tradition of the Prophet, whoso is in love, and acteth chastely, and concealeth his passion, and dieth a martyr. Cigar is number 5 hell for Majig bears, Parsis, etc. It is used in the comic Persian curse, Finari wa Cigar al-Jadu Paidar equals Lane hell and Cigar his grandfather and his father. FN number 294, Arab. Sifr. I have warned readers that whistling is considered a kind of devilish speech by the Arabs, especially the Bedouin, and that the traveller must avoid it. It savours of idolatry. In the Quran we find, chaps. 8. 35, their prayer at the house of God, Kaaba, is none other than whistling and hand clapping, and tradition says that they whistled through their fingers. Besides, many of the jinn have only round holes by way of mouths, and their speech is whistling, a kind of bird language like sibilant English. FN number 295, Arab. Kilwakal equals lit. It was said and he said, a popular phrase for chit-chat, tittle-tattle, brattle and brate, etc. FN number 296, Arab. Hades. Comparing it with the tradition of the Prophet. FN number 297, Arab. Mikasha, the thick part of a midrib of a palm frond soaked for some days in water and beaten out till the fibres separate. It makes an exceedingly hard, although not a lasting broom. FN number 298, Persian, the youth, the brave, Sansk, Juv, and Lat, Juvenus. The Kurd, in tales, is generally a sturdy thief, and in real life is little better. FN number 299, Arab. Yashatir, lit. Oh clever one, in a bad sense. FN number 300, Lane, 2. 453, has it. That I may dress thy hair, etc. This is bowdlerizing with a witness. FN number 301, the sign of respect when a personage dismounts. Pilgrimage I. 77. FN number 302, so the Hindus speak of the defilement of separation as if it were an impurity. FN number 303, Lane, I. 605, gives a long and instructive note on these public royal banquets which were expected from the lieges by Muslim subjects. The hanging penalty is, perhaps, a tattle exaggerated, but we find the same excess in the priestly Gesta Romanorum. FN number 304, had he eaten it he would have become her guest. Amongst the older Bedouin it was sufficient to spit upon the man, in entreaty, to claim his protection, so the horse thieves when caught were placed in a hole in the ground covered over with matting to prevent this happening. Similarly Saladin, Salah al-Din, the chivalrous would not order a cup of water for the robber, Renald de Chatelain, before putting him to death. FN number 305, Arab. Kishk properly kishk equals wheatmeal coarsely ground and eaten with milk or broth. It is de rigueur with the Egyptian Copts on the Friday of Sorrow, Good Friday, and Lane gives the recipe for making it. M.E. Chaps. 26. FN number 306, in those days distinctive of Muslims. FN number 307, the euphemism has before been noticed. The Muslim reader would not like to pronounce the words I am a Nazarene. The same formula occurs a little lower down to save the reciter or reader from saying be my wife divorced, etc. FN number 308, Arab, Hajj, a favorite Egyptianism. We are wrong to write Hajji which in Eastern would pronounce Hajj. FN number 309, this is Cain Chaf. FN number 310, whose shell fits very tight. FN number 311, his hand was like a raven's because he ate with thumb and 2 fingers and it came up with a rice about it like a camel's hoof in dirty ground. This refers to the proverb, Burkhardt, 756, he comes down a grow claw, small, and comes up a camel hoof, huge and round. FN number 312, Easterns have a superstitious belief in the powers of food. I knew a learned man who never sat down to eat without a ceremonious salam to his meat. FN number 313, Lane, 2. 464, uses the vile Turkish corruption Rustum, which, like its fellow Rustum, would make a Persian shudder. FN number 314, Arab. Darage that is let them slide, Americanize. FN number 315. This tetrastich has occurred before, so I quote Mr. Payne, in loco. FN number 316, Sheikh of Al-Batna and Jabir, therefore Assyrian of the Oran near Damascus and grandson to Azu, Esau. Arab mystics, unlike the vulgar who see only his patience, recognize that inflexible integrity which refuses to utter words of wind and which would not, against his conscience, confess to wrongdoing merely to pacify the Lord who was stronger than himself. The classics taught this noble lesson in the case of Prometheus versus Zeus. Many articles are called after Job, for example Rano Ebo Hubeira, Inula Arabica and Undulata, a creeper with which he rubbed himself and got well. The Copts do the same on Job's Wednesday, that is that before Whitsunday os. Job's father is a nickname of the camel, etc. etc. FN number 317, Lane, in loco, renders I am of their number. But Filsac means popularly, driven, to the point of death. FN number 318, lit. Equals pathway, road, hence the bridge well known as finer than a hair and sharper than a sword, over which all, except Khadijah and a chosen few, must pass on the day of doom. A Persian apparatus bodily annexed by al-Islam. The old bears called it Pulai Chinavar or Chinavat, and the Jews borrowed it from them as they did all their fancies of a future life against which Moses had so gallantly fought. It is said that a bridge over the grisly brook Kedron was called Sirat, the road, and hence the idea, as that of hellfire from Jannah, where children were passed through the fire to Moloch. A doubtful hadith says, the Prophet declared Al-Sirat to be the name of a bridge over hellfire, dividing hell from paradise, pp. 17, 122, Reynolds Strands. Of Al-Sayuti's traditions, etc. In Quran 5, Sirat is simply a path, from Sirata, he swallowed, even as the way devours, makes a lack a more mouthful of those who travel it. The word was a rig, written with sin but changed for easier articulation to sad, one of the four huruf al-mutabakat, the flattened, formed by the broadened tongue in contact with the palate. This sad also by the figure ishmam, equals conversion, turns slightly to as, the intermediate between sin and sad. FN number 319. The rule in Turkey where Katamites rise to the highest rank, ka est en honda bon famille, said a Turkish officer in Egypt, illiterate. Hence Alfie, one who costs 1,000, is a well-known cognomen. The Pasha of the Syrian caravan, with which I travelled, had been the slave of a slave, and he was not a solitary instance. Pilgrimage I. 90. FN number 320. The device of the banquet is dainty enough for any old Italian noveler. All that now comes is pure Egyptian polysory speaking to the gallery and being answered by roars of laughter. FN number 321. That is, art thou ceremonially pure and therefore fit for handling by a great man like myself? FN number 322. In past days before Egypt was Frankified, many overlanders used to wash away the traces of travel by a Turkish bath which mostly ended in the appearance of a rump-wriggling little lad who offered to shampoo them. Many accepted his offices without dreaming of his usual use or misuse. FN number 323. Arab. Imam. This is, to a Muslim, a most offensive comparison between prayer and cop. FN number 324. Arab. Fisherman high, alluding to a peculiarity highly prized by Egyptians, the use of the constrictive gene muscles, the sphincter, for which Abyssinian women are famous. The kabeza, equals holder, as she is called, can sit astraddle upon a man and can provoke the venereal orgasm, not by wriggling and moving but by tightening and loosing the male member with the muscles of her privities, milking it as it were. Consequently the Kasanoya set costs treble the money of the concubines. Aranga, p. 127. FN number 325. The little eunuchs had evidently studied the harem. FN number 326, lane 2. 494, relates from Malamtrazi, that when Gamarweh, governor of Egypt, 9th century, suffered from insomnia, his physician ordered a pool of the quicksilver 50 by 50 cubits, to be laid out in front of his palace, now the Rumeila Square. At the corners of the pool were silver pegs, to which were attached by silver rings strong bands of silk, and a bed of skins, inflated with air, being thrown upon the pool and secured by the bands, remained in a continual state of agreeable vacillation. We are not told that the prince was thereby salivated like the late Colonel Sykes when boiling his mercury for thermometric experiments. FN number 327. The name seems now unknown. Alke here is somewhat stronger than wag, meaning at least a wicked wit. Properly it is the span. Perdido, a youth cast off, color, by his friends, though not so strong a term as half-ish equals a blackguard. FN number 328, Arab. Fasak equals parasang. FN number 329, Arab. Nahazas for equals yellow copper, brass as opposed to nahazama equals copper. The reader who cares to study the subject will find much about it in my book of the sword, chaps. 4. FN number 330, lane 2. 479, translates one stanza of this Muhammad's pentastich, and speaks of 5 more, which would make 6. FN number 331, a servile name, delicacy, elegance. FN number 332, these verses have occurred twice, night 9, etc., so I give Lane's version, 2. 482. FN number 333, a Badawi tribe to which belonged the generous Man bin Zadab, often mentioned the Knights. FN number 334, Wealthy harems, I have said, are hotbeds of Sufism and Tribadism. Every woman past her first youth has a girl whom she calls her myrtle. In Damascus, at Agbom, capital of Dahom, I found that a troop of women was kept for the use of the Amazons. Mission to Jalel, 273. Amongst the wild Arabs, who ignore Socratic and Sapphic diversions, the lover is always more jealous of his beloved's girlfriends than of men rivals. In England, we content ourselves with saying that women corrupt women more than men do. FN number 335, the Hebrew Pentateuch, Roll of the Law. FN number 336, I need hardly notice the brass trays, platters and table covers with inscriptions which are familiar to every reader. Those made in the East for foreign markets mostly carry imitation inscriptions lest infidel eyes fall upon Holy Writ. FN number 337. These 6 districts are in Night 13. I borrowed Trans, p. 125, to show his peculiar treatment of spinning out 12 lines to 38. FN number 338, Arab. Mazamira equals chatting at night. Easterns are inordinately fond of the practice, and the wild Arabs often sit up till dawn, talking over the affairs of the tribe. Indeed, a sheikh is expected to do so. Early to bed and early to rise is a civilized, not a savage or a barbarous saying. Samir is a companion in night talk, Rafik of the road, prohibiting riding horse or camel, Kaidan sitting, Sharib and Rafiz at drink, and Nadim at table, Ahad is an ally, and Sharik a partner, all on the model of Fuil. FN number 339, in both lover and beloved the excess of love gave them this clairvoyance. FN number 340, the prayer will be granted for the excess, not the purity, of her love. FN number 341, this wailing over the past is one of the commonplaces of Badawi poetry. The traveller cannot fail, I repeat, to notice the chronic melancholy of peoples dwelling under the brightest skies. FN number 342, moons equals Buddha. FN number 343, in paradise as a martyr. FN number 344, that is to intercede for me in heaven, as if the young woman were the prophet. FN number 345, the comparison is admirable as the 2 letters are written. It occurs in Al-Hariri, as of Ramla. So I embraced him close as lamb cleaves to Aleph. And again. She laid aside reluctance and I embraced her close as if I were a lamb and my love Aleph. The Lomato laugh in Syriac is similarly collocated. FN number 346. Here is a double entendre and the infirm letters, viz. A, W and Y, not subject to accidents, left him. The 3 make up the root equals pitying, condoling. FN number 347, showing that consummation had taken place. It was a sign of good breeding to avoid all indecent hurry when going to bed. In some Muslim countries the bridegroom does not consummate the marriage for 7 nights, out of respect for 1. Father, 2. Mother, 3. Brother and so forth. If he hurry matters he will be hooted as an impatient man and the wise will quote, man is created of precipitation, Quran Chaps. 21. 38, meaning hasty and inconsiderate. I remark with pleasure that the whole of this tale is told with commendable delicacy. O. C. Secomnia. FN number 348, Pers. Noroz equals Noroz, new day, here used in the Arab. Plur.Nawares, as it lasted 6 days. There are only 4 universal festivals, the solstices and the equinoxes, and every successive religion takes them from the sun and perverts them to its own private purposes. Lane 2. 496, derives the venerable Noaz whose birth is hid in the outer glooms of antiquity from the Jewish Passover. FN number 349, again the babes of the eyes. FN number 350, that is, whose glances as the light of the glowing blaze or embers. The Arab. Mikbaz equals pan or pot full of small charcoal, is an article well known in Italy and southern Europe. The word is apparently used here because it rhymes with anfas, souls, spirits. FN number 351, that is martyrdom, a Quranic term visibly lie equals on a way of Allah. FN number 352, these rhymes in Y, E and Y are purposely affected to imitate the cadence of the Arabic. FN number 353, Arab. Sujud, the ceremonial prostration, touching the ground with the forehead. So in the Old Testament he bowed, or fell down, and worshipped. Jan. 24:26 Matt. 2:11, of which our translation gives a wrong idea. FN number 354, a girl is called Althea equals A-shaped. FN number 355, that is the medial form of M. FN number 356, that is the inverted N. FN number 357, it may also mean a sevine of pearls. FN number 358, Quran 27:12. This was one of the 9 signs to wicked Pharaoh. The hand of Moses is a symbol of power and ability, Quran 7:105. The whiteness was supernatural beauty, not leprosy of the Jews, Exod 4:6, but brilliancy, after being born red or black. According to some commentators, Moses was a Negro. FN number 359, Quran 3:103, the other faces become black. This explains I have noticed the use of the phrases in blessing and cursing. FN number 360, here we have the naked legend of the Negro's origin, one of those nursery tales in which the ignorant of Christendom still believe, but the deduction from the fable and the testimony to the Negro's lack of intelligence, though unpleasant to our ignorant Negrophiles, are factual and satisfactory. FN number 361, Quran, Xi 1:2, an oath of Allah to reward and punish with heaven and hell. FN number 362, alluding to the black drop in the heart. It was taken from Muhammad's by the Archangel Gabriel. The fable seems to have arisen from the verse Have we not opened thy breast? Quran, Chaps. Sif. 1. The popular tale is that Halima, the Badawi nurse of Muhammad, of the Banu Sayyid tribe, once saw her son, also a child, running towards her and asked him what was the matter. He answered, my little brother was seized by 2 men in white who stretched him on the ground and opened his belly for a full account and deduction. See the Reverend Mr. Badger's article, Muhammad, p. 959, in volume in Dictionary of Christian Biography. FN number 363, Arab. Samr, lit. Brown, as it is afterwards used, but politely applied to a Negro, Ya Abu Samra. O father of brownness. FN number 364, Arab. Luma equals dark hue of the inner lips admired by the Arabs and to us suggesting most unpleasant ideas. Mr. Chenery renders it dark red, and ruddy altogether, missing the idea. FN number 365, Arab. Sauda, feminine of azwad, black, and meaning black bile, melancholia, as opposed to leucocolia. FN number 366, that is the Magians, Sabians, Zoroastrians. FN number 367, the Fulga of the Latins who did not forget to celebrate the shining of the nails although they did not henna them like Easterns. Some, however, have suggested that alludes to colouring matter. FN number 368, women with white skins are supposed to be heating and unwholesome, hence the Hindu Rajas slept with dark girls in the hot season. FN number 369, Muslims sensibly have a cold as well as a hot hell, the former called Zamaria, lit. Intense cold or ai baragat, after a well in Hazramaut, as Jannah, Arab. Jahannam, from the furnace-like ravine east of Jerusalem, Night CCCXXV. The icy hell is necessary in terrarium for peoples who inhabit cold regions and who in a hot hell only look forward to an eternity of coals and candles gratis. The sensible missionaries preached it in Iceland till foolishly forbidden by papal bull. FN number 370, Quran 2:26, speaking of Abraham when he entertained the angels unawares. FN number 371, Arab. Rakb, usually applied to a fast-going caravan of dromedary riders, pilgrimage 329. The kafila is Arab, caravan is a corruption of the Purs. Kawan. FN number 372, a popular saying. It is interesting to contrast this dispute between fat and thin with the Shakespearean humour of Falstaff and Prince Henry. FN number 373, Arab. Dalak Vulg. Hajj al-Hammam, Hammam's tone. The comparison is very apt. The rasps are of baked clay artificially roughened. See illustrations in Lane M. E. Chaps. 16. The rope is called masat, a bristling line of palm fibre like the koya now familiarly known in England. FN number 374, although the Arabs' ideal of beauty, as has been seen and said, corresponds with ours the Egyptians, modern, the Moroccans and other negrified races like walking tanbuts as Clapperton called his amorous widow. FN number 375, Arab. Kaiser or Kazar and the rattan palm. Those who have seen this most graceful palmagencus in its native forest will recognize the neatness of the simile. FN number 376. This is the popular idea of the bushy veil of nature in women. It is always removed by depilatories and velication. When Bilqis Queen of Sheba discovered her legs by lifting her robe, Quran 27, Solomon was minded to marry her, but would not do so till the devils had by a depilatory removed the hair. The popular preparation, called nura, consists of quicklime 7 parts, and zirnic or opument, 3 parts. It is applied in the hammam to a perspiring skin, and it must be washed off immediately the hair is loosened or it burns and discolors. The rest of the body bile, shayara top, tish apostrophe r equals hair, is eradicated by applying a mixture of boiled honey with turpentine or other gum, and rolling it with a hand till the hair comes off. Men, I have said, remove the boobs by shaving, and pluck the hair of the armpits, one of the vestiges of pre-Adamite man. The good depilatory is still a desideratum. The best perfumers of London and Paris have none which they can recommend. The reason is plain. The hair bulb can be eradicated only by destroying the skin. FN number 377, Quran 2:64, referring to the heifer which the Jews were ordered to sacrifice. FN number 378, Arab. Kala, a Quranic term possibly from kal, all, and not, equals precise non altogether not. FN number 379, Habab or harbour, the fine particles of dust, which we call motes. The cosset, Arab. Cosset, is the Anglo-Indian term for a running courier, mostly under government, the Persian shatir and the Gbraravand. FN number 380, Arab. Sambari, or very long thin lance, so called after Sama, the maker, or the place of making. See volume 2. p. 1. It is supposed to cast, when planted in the ground, a longer shadow in proportion to its height than any other thing of the kind. FN number 381, Arab. Sulafa, properly presine which flows from the grapes before pressure. The blur. So if also means tresses of hair and past events, thus there is a triple entendre. And again he is used for she. FN number 382, there is a pun in the last line, Kalan, a mole, Kalorni, Ridme, etc. FN number 383, of Old Fustat, afterwards part of southern Cairo, a proverbially miserable quarter, hence the saying. They quoted Misr to Kahira, Cairo, whereon Babalu crows with its grass, in derision of nobodies who push themselves forward. Burkhardt, Prof. 276. FN number 384, its fruits are the heads of devils, a true Dantesque fancy. Quran, chaps. 17. 62, the tree cursed in the Quran and in shops. 37. 60, is this better entertainment, or the tree of al-Sakam? Commentators say that it is a thorn bearing a bitter almond which grows in the Tahama and was therefore promoted to hell. FN number 385, Arab. Lazam, Latham, as opposed to Boswarbose, a bus, and Qibla, a kiss. FN number 386, Arab. Jafan, blur. Of Jafn, which may mean eyebrows or eyelashes, and only the context can determine which. FN number 387, very characteristic of Egyptian manners is the man who loves 6 girls equally well, who lends them, as it were, to the caliph, and who takes back the goods as if in no wise damaged by the loan. FN number 388, the moon is masculine possibly by connection with the Assyrian loon god Sin, but I can find no cause for the sun, Shams, being feminine. FN number 389, Arab. Al-Amin, a title of the Prophet. It is usually held that this proud name, the honest man, was applied by his fellow citizens to Muhammad in early life, and that in his 25th year, when the 8th Kaaba was being built, it induced the tribes to make him their umpire concerning the distinction of placing in position the black stone which Gabriel had brought from heaven to be set up as the starting post for the 7 sittings. He distributed the honor amongst the clans and thus gave universal satisfaction. His Christian biographers mostly omit to record an anecdote which speaks so highly in Muhammad's favor. Pilgrimage 3. 192. FN number 390. The idea is that Abu Nuwas was a thought reader, such being the prerogative of inspired poets in the East. His drunkenness and debauchery only added to his power. I have already noticed that Allah strike thee dead, Kaitala Kayala, is like our phrase confound the fellow, how clever he is. FN number 391, again said facetiously, devil take you. FN number 392, in all hot damp countries it is necessary to clothe dogs, morning and evening especially. Otherwise they soon die of rheumatism and loin disease. FN number 393, equals Beatrice. A fragment of these lines is in Night CCCXV. See also Night XXC. FN number 394. The Muslims borrowed the horrible idea of a jealous god from their kinsmen, the Jews. Every race creates its own deity after the fashion of itself. Jehovah is distinctly a Hebrew, the Christian Theos is originally a Judeo-Greek, and Allah half Badawi Arab. In this tale Allah, despotic and unjust, brings a generous and noble-minded man to beggary, simply because he fed his dogs off gold plate. Wisdom and morality have their infancy and youth. The great value of such tales as these is to show and enable us to measure man's development. FN number 395, Introduction, Lane 2. 501, the merchant says to ex-dives, thou art wrong in charging destiny with injustice. If thou art ignorant of the cause of thy ruin, I will acquaint thee with it. Thou feddest the dogs in dishes of gold and leftest the poor to die of hunger. A superstition, but intelligible. FN number 396, Arab. Saraf equals a money changer. FN number 397, Arab. Burqa, a common feature in the landscapes of Lower Egypt. It is either a natural pool left by the overflow of the Nile, or, as in the text, a built-up tank, like the Talab for which India is famous. Sundry of these burqas are or were in Cairo itself, and some are mentioned in the Nights. FN number 398. This sneer at the military and the police might come from an English convict's lips. FN number 399. lit. The Conquering King, a dynastic title assumed by Salah al-Din, Saladin, and sundry of the Ayyubite sovereigns of Egypt, whom I would call the Soldans. FN number 400, Cairo, that is City of Mars, the planet, is Cairo. Bulak is the port suburb on the Nile, till 1858 wholly disjoint from the city, and Fustat is the outlier popularly called Old Cairo. The latter term is generally translated town of leathern tents, but in Arabic Fustat is an abode of r equals hair, such as horsehair, in fact any hair but waba equals soft hair, as the camels. Selane, Lex. FN number 401, Arab. Adli equals just, a legal witness to whose character there is no tangible objection, a prime consideration in Muslim law. Here it is evidently used ironically for a hypocritical rascal. FN number 402, Lane, 2. 503, considers 3,000 dinars, the figure in the Brez. Edit, a more probable sum. Possibly, but, I repeat, exaggeration is one of the many characteristics of the Knights. FN number 403, Kag. Edit. Kazir, the word is generally written Kazda, Sansk. Kastira, born probably from the Greek. FN number 404, this would have passed for a peccadillo in the good old days. As late as 1840 the Anaut soldiers used to pot any peasant who dared to ride, instead of walking, past their barracks. Life is cheap in hot countries. FN number 405, Quran, 12:46, a passage expounding the doctrine of free will. He who doth right doth it to the advantage of his own soul, and he who doth evil, doth it against the same, for thy Lord, etc. FN number 406, Arab. Safa, whence are sofa. In Egypt it is a raised shelf generally of stone, about 4 feet high and headed with one or more arches. It is an elaborate variety of the simple tak or niche, a mere hollow in the thickness of the wall. Both are used for such articles as basin, ewer and soap, coffee cups, water bottles etc. FN number 407, in Upper Egypt, a Polynipolis Pava, pronounced Goose, the Coptic Goes Berber, once an emporium of the Arabian trade. FN number 408, this would appeal strongly to a pious Muslim. FN number 409, that is the father of a certain person, here the merchant whose name may have been Abul Hassan, etc. The useful word, thingumbob, what do you call him, Doncha, etc., has been bodily transferred into Spanish and Portuguese fulano. It is of old genealogy, found in the Heb. Fuluni, which applies to a person only in Ruth 4. But is constantly so employed by rabbinic writers. The Greek use Greek letters. FN number 410, lit. By his, that is her, hand, etc. Henslane, 2. 507, makes nonsense of the line. FN number 411, Arab. Badra, as has been said, is properly a weight of 10,000 dirhams or drachmas, but popularly used for largesse thrown to the people at festivals. FN number 412, Arab. Allahu Alam, God knows, here the popular phrase for our, I know not, when it would be rude to say bluntly Madri equals don't know. FN number 413, there is a picturesque Muslim idea that good deeds become incarnate and assume human shapes to cheer the dead in his grave, to greet him when he enters paradise and so forth. It was borrowed from the highly imaginative faith of the Gbra, the Zoroastrian. China Vador Chanyad Pal, Sirat, the Judgment Bridge, 37 rods, risen, long, straight and 37 fathoms broad for the good, and crooked and narrow as sword edge for the bad, a nymph-like form will appear to the virtuous and say, I am the personification of thy good deeds. In hell there will issue from a fetid gale a gloomy figure with head like a minaret, red eyeballs, hooked nose, teeth like pillars, spear-like fangs, snaky locks etc. And when asked who he is he will reply, I am the personification of thine evil acts. Abestani. 285. The Hindus also personify everything. FN number 414, Arab. Ban Israel, applied to the Jews when theirs was the true faith that is before the coming of Jesus, the Messiah, whose mission completed that of Moses and made it obsolete, matruk, even as the mission of Jesus was completed and abrogated by that of Muhammad. The term Yahud equals Jew is applied scornfully to the chosen people after they rejected the Messiah, but as I have said, Israelite is used on certain occasions, Jew on others. FN number 415, Arab. Kasa, a wooden bowl, a porringer, also applied to a saucer. FN number 416, Arab. Rasul equals 1 cent, an angel, an apostle, not to be translated, as by the vulgar, prophet. Moreover, Rasul is higher than Nabi, prophet, such as Abraham, Isaac, etc., depositaries of al-Islam, but with the succession restricted to their own families. Nabi Mursal, prophet apostle, is the highest of all, 1 sent with a book. Of these are now only 4, Moses, David, Jesus and Muhammad, the writings of the rest having perished. In al-Islam also angels rank below men, being only intermediaries, equals, nunci, messengers, between the Creator and the created. This knowledge once did me a good turn at Harat, not a safe place in those days. First footsteps in East Africa, p. 349. FN number 417, a doctor of law in the reign of Al-Ma'mun. FN number 418. Here the exclamation is equals DV, and it may be assumed generally to have that sense. FN number 419, Arab. Tailasan, a turban-worn hood fashioned by the Katabor preacher. I have sketched it in my pilgrimage and described it. 315. Some Orientalists derive Tailasan from Atlas equals satin, which is peculiarly inappropriate. The word is apparently barbarous and possibly Persian like Kalansiwa, the dervish cap. Thou son of a Tailasan equals a barbarian. Desasi, Grest. Arab. 269. FN number 420, Arab. Kainia Vug. Kaniat equals patronymic or matronymic, a name beginning with Abu, father, or with mother. There are so few proper names in al-Islam that such surnames, which, as will be seen, are of infinite variety, become necessary to distinguish individuals. Of these sobriquets I shall give specimens further on. FN number 421, whoso seeth me in his sleep, seeth me truly, for Satan cannot assume my semblance, said, or is said to have said, Muhammad. Hence the vision is true although it comes in early night and not before dawn. See Lane M. E. Chaps. 9. FN number 422, Arab. Al-Mawkab, the day when the pilgrims march out of the city, it is a holiday for all, high and low. FN number 423, the Gate of Salutation, at the southwestern corner of the mosque where Muhammad is buried. Pilgrimage 260 and plan, here visitation, 0, begins. FN number 424, the tale is told by al-Ishaqi in the reign of al-Ma'mun. FN number 425, the speaker in dreams is the Heb. Wagid, which the learned and angry Gratz, Geschicht, etc. Volume 9, absurdly translates Storm Sufal. FN number 426, 10th Abbaside. AD 849-861. FN number 427, Arab. Muwalad, Fem. Muwalada, a realing, a slave born in a Muslim land. The numbers may appear exaggerated, but even the petty king of Ashanti had, till the last war, 3,333 wives. FN number 428, the under-prefect of Baghdad. FN number 429, Jaffa, our old Jaffa, which is painfully like Gaffer, that is good father, means either a rushing river or a rivulet. FN number 430, a regular fella's name also that of a village, pilgrimage I. 43, where a pleasant story is told about one Hakel. FN number 431, the mountain means the rocky and uncultivated ground south of Cairo, such as Jebel al-Lama and the geological seacoast flanked by the old Cairo-Suez highway. FN number 432, a popular phrase equals are sharp as a razor. FN number 433, that is are men so few, a favorite Persian phrase. FN number 434, she is a woman of rank who would cause him to be assassinated. FN number 435, this is not Al-Hakim B. Imrillah, the famous or infamous founder of the Druze faith and held by them to be, not an incarnation of the Godhead, but the Godhead itself in propria persona, who reigned AD 926-1021. Al-Hakim is the Orthodox Abbasid Caliph of Egypt who dated from 2 centuries after him, AD 1261. Had the former been meant, it would have thrown back this part of the nights to an earlier date than is generally accepted. But in a place still to come I shall again treat of the subject. FN number 436, for an account of the similar kind which was told to me during the last few years see Midian Revisited, I. 15. These hiding places are innumerable in lands of venerable antiquity like Egypt, and, if there were any contrivance for detecting hidden treasure, it would make the discoverer many times a millionaire. FN number 437, that is it had been given to him or his in writing, like the book left to the old woman before quoted in Midian, etc. FN number 438, Arab. Kurd, Pron. In Egypt Kurd. It is usually the hideous Abyssinian cynocephalus which is tamed by the ape leader popularly called Kuradati, Lane, M.E., Chaps. 20. The beast has a natural penchant for women. I heard of one which attempted to rape a girl in the public street and was prevented only by a sentinel's bayonet. They are powerful animals and bite like greyhounds. FN number 439, Easterns attribute many complaints, such as toothache, to worms, visible as well as microscopic, which may be held a fair prolepsis of the germ theory, the bacterium, the bacillus, the microbe. Nymphomania, the disease alluded to in these 2 tales is always attributed to worms in the vagina. FN number 440, bestiality, very rare in Arabia, is fatally common amongst those most debauched of debauched races, the Egyptian proper and the Sindhis. Hence the Pentateuch, whose object was to breed a larger population of fighting men, made death the penalty for lying with the beast. Dut. 27. 21. C. S. Sanini, Travels, English translation, p. 663, gives a curious account of fell lewdness. The female crocodile during congress is turned upon her back, and cannot rise without difficulty. Will it be believed that there are men who take advantage of the helpless situation of the female, drive off the male, and supplant him in this frightful intercourse, horrible embraces, the knowledge of which was wanting to complete the disgusting history of human perversity? The French traveller forgets to add the superstitious explanation of this congress which is the sovereignest charm for rising to rank and riches. The Ajay Balhain tells a tale, Chaps. 39, of a certain Muhammad bin Bulishad who had issue by a she-ape. The young ones were hairless of body and wore quasi-human faces, and the father's sight had become dim by his bestial practice. The Book of the Thousand Nights and a Night, a plain and literal translation of the Arabian Nights' Entertainments. Translated and annotated by Richard F. Burton. Volume 5, privately printed by the Burton Club. To Dr. George Bird. My dear Bird, this is not a strictly medical work, although in places treating of subjects which may modestly be called hygienic. I inscribe it to you because your knowledge of Egypt will enable you to appreciate its finer touches, and for another and a yet more cogent reason, namely, that you are one of my best and oldest friends. Ever yours sincerely, Richard F. Burton. Athenham Club, October 20, 1885. Contents of the 5th volume. 59. The Ebony Horse 60. Owns Al-Nujad and the Wazir's daughter Al-Ward Thilak Mamor Rose in Hood 61. Abu Nawas with the 3 boys and the Caliph Harun al-Rashid 62. Abdullah bin Malma with the man of Bassora and his slave girl 63. The lovers of the Banwara 64. The Wazir of Al-Yaman and his younger brother 65. The loves of the boy and girl at school 66. Al-Mutamiz and his wife Umayma 67. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid and Queens Ubaidah in the bath 68. Harun al-Rashid and the 3 poets 69. Nazab bin al-Zubayr and Isha his wife 70. Abu al-Aswad and his slave girl 71. Harun al-Rashid and the 2 slave girls 72. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid and the 3 slave girls 73. The miller and his wife 74. The simpleton and the sharper 75. The Qazi Abu Yusuf with Harun al-Rashid and Queens Ubaidah 76. The Caliph al-Hakim and the merchant 77. King Kisra Nushawan and the village damsel 78. The water carrier and the goldsmith's wife 79. Kisra and Shirin and the fisherman 80. Yahya bin Khalid the Barmecide and the poor man 81. Muhammad al-Amin and the slave girl 82. The sons of Yahya bin Khalid and Said bin Salim al-Bahli 83. The woman's trick against her husband 84. The devout woman and the 2 wicked elders 85. Jafar the Barmecide and the old Badawi 86. The Caliph Omar bin al-Khattab and the young Badawi 87. The Caliph al-Mamam and the pyramids of Egypt 88. The thief and the merchant 89. Masrur the eunuch and Ibn al-Karabi 90. The devotee prince 91. The unwise schoolmaster who fell in love by report 92. The foolish dominie 93. The illiterate who set up for a schoolmaster 94. The king and the virtuous wife 95. Abd al-Rahman the Maghribi's story of the Rook 96. Adi bin Zayd and the Princess Hind 97. The Balaguzai with the lady and Muslim bin al-Walid 98. Isaac of Mosul and the merchant 99. The 3 unfortunate lovers 100. How Abu Hassan break wind 101. The lovers of the Banu Ta'i 102. The mad lover 103. The prior who became a Muslim 104. The loves of Abu Isa and Jurat al-Ain 105. Al-Amin son of al-Rashid and his uncle Ibrahim bin al-Mahdi 106. Al-Fath bin Qakan and al-Mutawakil 107. The man's dispute with a learned woman concerning the relative excellence of male and female 108. Abu Suwaidan the pretty old woman 109. The Emir Ali bin Tahir and the girl Mayuniz 110. The woman who had a boy and the other who had a man to lover 111. Ali the Cain and the haunted house in Baghdad 112. The pilgrim man and the old woman 113. Abu Alas and his slave girl Tawaddad 114. The angel of death with the proud king and the devout man 115. The angel of death and the rich king 116. The angel of death and the king of the children of Israel 117. Iskanazu al-Karnain and a certain tribe of poor folk 118. The righteousness of King Anushawan 119. The Jewish Qazi and his pious wife 120. The shipwrecked woman and her child 121. The pious black slave 122. The devout tray maker and his wife 123. Al-Jajjaj and the pious man 124. The blacksmith who could handle fire without hurt 125. The devotee to whom Allah gave a cloud for service and the devout king 126. The Muslim champion and the Christian damsel 127. The Christian king's daughter and the Muslim 128. The Prophet and the Justice of Providence 129. The Ferryman of the Nile and the Hermit 130. The Island King and the Pious Israelite 131. Abu al-Hassan and Abu Ja'far the Leper 132. The Queen of the Serpent Say. The Adventures of Balukia B. The Story of Janshaw. The Book of the Thousand Nights and a Night. The Ebony Horse. FN number 1. There was once in times of yore and ages long gone before, a great and puissant king, of the kings of the Persians, Sabur by name, who was the richest of all the kings in store of wealth and dominion and surpassed each and every in wit and wisdom. He was generous, open-handed and beneficent, and he gave to those who sought him and repelled not those who resorted to him, and he comforted the broken-hearted and honorably entreated those who fled to him for refuge. Moreover, he loved the poor and was hospitable to strangers and did the oppressed justice upon the oppressor. He had 3 daughters, like full moons of shining light or flower gardens blooming bright, and a son as he were the moon, and it was his wont to keep 2 festivals in the 12th, those of the Nowruz, or New Year, and Mihin the autumnal equinox, FN number 2, on which occasions he threw open his palaces and gave largesse and made proclamation of safety and security and promoted his chamberlains and viceroys, and the people of his realm came into him and saluted him and gave him joy of the holy day, bringing him gifts and servants and eunuchs. Now he loved science and geometry, and one festival day as he sat on his kingly throne there came into him 3 wise men, cunning artificers and past masters in all manner of craft and inventions, skilled in making things curious and rare, such as confound the wit, and versed in the knowledge of occult truths and perfect in mysteries and subtleties. And they were of 3 different tongues and countries, the first a Hindi or Indian, FN number 3, the second a Rumi or Greek, and the third a Farsi or Persian. The Indian came forward and, prostrating himself before the king, wished him joy of the festival and laid before him a present befitting his dignity, that is to say, a man of gold, set with precious gems and jewels of price and handing in hand a golden trumpet. When Sabur FN number 4 saw this, he asked, "O sage, what is the virtue of this figure?" And the Indian answered, "O my lord, if this figure be set at the gate of thy city, it will be a guardian over it, for, in an enemy enter the place, it will blow this clarion against him and he will be seized with a palsy and drop down dead." Much the king marvelled at this and cried, "By Allah, O sage, and this thy word be true, I will grant thee thy wish and thy desire." Then came forward the Greek and, prostrating himself before the king, presented him with a basin of silver, in whose midst was a peacock of gold, surrounded by 24 chicks of the same metal. Sabur looked at them and turning to the Greek, said to him, "O sage, what is the virtue of this peacock?" "O my lord," answered he, "as often as an hour of the day or night passeth, it pecketh one of its young and grieth out and flappeth its wings, till the 24 hours are accomplished, and when the month cometh to an end, it will open its mouth and thou shalt see the crescent therein." And the king said, "And thou speak sooth, I will bring thee to thy wish and thy desire." Then came forward the Persian sage and, prostrating himself before the king, presented him with a horse FN number 5, of the blackest ebony wood inlaid with golden jewels, and ready harnessed with saddle, bridle and stirrups such as befit kings, which when Sabur saw, he marvelled with exceeding marvel and was confounded at the beauty of its form and the ingenuity of its fashion. So he asked, "What is the use of this horse of wood, and what is its virtue and what the secret of its movement?" And the Persian answered, "O my lord, the virtue of this horse is that, if one mount him, it will carry him whither he will and fare with its rider through the air and cover the space of a year in a single day." The king marvelled and was amazed at these 3 wonders, following thus hard upon one another on the same day, and turning to the sage, said to him, "By Allah the Omnipotent, and our Lord the Beneficent, who created all creatures and feedeth them with meat and drink, and thy speech be veritable, and the virtue of thy contrivance appear, I will assuredly give thee whatsoever thou lustest for, and will bring thee to thy desire and thy wish. FN number 6. Then he entertained the sages 3 days, that he might make trial of their gifts, after which they brought the figures before him, and each took the creature he had wrought and showed him the mystery of its movement. The trumpeter blew the drum, the peacock becked its chicks, and the Persian sage mounted the ebony house, whereupon it soared with him high in air and descended again. When King Sabur saw all this, he was amazed and perplexed, and felt like to fly for joy, and said to the 3 sages, Now I am certified of the truth of your words, and it behoveth me to quit me of my promise. Ask ye, therefore, what ye will, and I will give you that same. Now the report of the king's daughters had reached the sages, so they answered, If the king be content with us and accept of our gifts and allow us to prefer a request to him, we crave of him that he give us his 3 daughters in marriage, that we may be his sons-in-law, for that the stability of kings may not be gainsaid. Quoth the king, I grant you that which you wish and you desire, and bade summon the Kazi forthright, that he might marry each of the sages to one of his daughters. Now it fortuned that the princesses were behind a curtain, looking on, and when they heard this, the youngest considered her husband to be, and behold, he was an old man, FN number 7, 100 years of age, with hair frosted, forehead drooping, eyebrows mangy, ears slitten, beard and moustachios stained and dyed, eyes red and goggle, cheeks bleached and hollow, flabby nose like a brinjal, or eggplant. FN number 8, face like a cobbler's apron, teeth overlapping and lips like camel's kidneys, loose and pendulous, in brief a terror, a horror, a monster, for he was of the folk of his time the unsightliest, and of his age the frightfullest. Sundry of his grinders had been knocked out, and his eye teeth were like the tusks of the jinni who frighteneth poultry in hen-houses. Now the girl was the fairest and most graceful of her time, more elegant than the gazelle, however tender, than the gentlest zephyr, blander and brighter than the moon at her full, for amorous fray rightly suitable, confounding in graceful sway the waving bow, and outdoing in swimming gait the pacing row. In fine, she was fairer and sweeter by far than all her sisters. So, when she saw her suitor, she went to her chamber and strewed dust on her head and tore her clothes and fell to buffeting her face and weeping and wailing. Now the prince, her brother, Kamar al-Akmar, or the moon of moon's height, was then newly returned from a journey, and, hearing her weeping and crying, came into her, for he loved her with fond affection, more than his other sisters, and asked her, What aileth thee? What hath befallen thee? Tell me, and conceal naught from me. So she smote her breast and answered, O my brother and my dear one, I have nothing to hide. If the palace be straitened upon thy father, I will go out, and if he be resolved upon a foul thing, I will separate myself from him, though he consent not to make provision for me, and my Lord will provide. Quoth he, Tell me what meaneth this talk, and what hath straitened thy breast and troubled thy temper? O my brother and my dear one, answered the princess, know that my father hath promised me in marriage to a wicked magician who brought him, as a gift, a horse of black wood, and hath bewitched him with his craft and his egromancy. But, as for me, I will none of him, and would, because of him, I had never come into this world. Her brother soothed her and solaced her, then fared to his sire and said, What be this wizard to whom thou hast given my youngest sister in marriage, and what is this present which he hath brought thee, so that thou hast killed FN number 9, my sister with chagrin? It is not right that this should be. Now the Persian was standing by, and, when he heard the prince's words, he was mortified and filled with fury, and the king said, O my son, and thou sawest this horse, thy wit would be confounded, and thou wouldest be amated with amazement. Then he bade the slaves bring the horse before him, and they did so, and, when the prince saw it, it pleased him. So, being an accomplished cavalier, he mounted it forthright and struck its sides with the shovel-shaped stirrup irons, but it stirred not, and the king said to the sage, "Go show him its movement, that he also may help thee to win thy wish." Now the Persian bore the prince a grudge because he willed not he should have his sister, so he showed him the pin of ascent on the right side of the horse, and saying to him, "Drill this," left him. Thereupon the prince drilled the pin, and lo! the horse forthwith soared with him high in ether, as it were a bird, and gave not over flying till it disappeared from men's espying, whereat the king was troubled and perplexed about his case, and said to the Persian, "O sage, look how thou mayest make him descend." But he replied, "O my lord, I can do nothing, and thou wilt never see him again till resurrection day, for he, of his ignorance and pride, asked me not of the pin of descent, and I forgot to acquaint him therewith." When the king heard this, he was enraged with sore rage, and bade Bastinato the sorcerer and clap him in jail, whilst he himself cast the crown from his head and beat his face and smote his breast. Moreover, he shut the doors of his palaces and gave himself up to weeping and keening, he and his wife and daughters and all the folk of the city, and thus their joy was turned to annoy and their gladness changed into sore affliction and sadness. Thus far concerning them, but as regards the prince, the horse gave not over soaring with him till he drew near the sun, whereat he gave himself up for lost and saw death in the skies, and was confounded at his case, repenting him of having mounted the horse, and saying to himself, "Verily, this was a device of the sage to destroy me on account of my youngest sister, but there is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. I am lost without recourse, but I wonder, did not he who made the ascent pin make also a descent pin?" Now he was a man of wit and knowledge and intelligence, so he fell to feeling all the parts of the horse, but saw nothing save a screw, like a cock's head, on its right shoulder and the like on the left, when quoth he to himself, "I see no sign save these things like buttons." Presently he turned the right hand pin, whereupon the horse flew heavenwards with increased speed. So he left it, and looking at the sinister shoulder and finding another pin, he wound it up, and immediately the steed's upwards motion slowed and ceased, and it began to descend, little by little, towards the face of the earth, while the rider became yet more cautious and careful of his life. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 358th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the prince wound up the sinister screw, the steed's upward motion slowed and ceased, and it began to descend, little by little, towards the earth, while the rider became yet more cautious and careful of his life. And when he saw this and knew the uses of the horse, his heart was filled with joy and gladness, and he thanked Almighty Allah for that he had deigned deliver him from destruction. Then he began to turn the horse's head whithersoever he would, making it rise and fall at pleasure, till he had gotten complete mastery over its every movement. He ceased not to descend the whole of that day, for that the steed's ascending flight had borne him afar from the earth, and, as he descended, he diverted himself with viewing the various cities and countries over which he passed, and which he knew not, never having seen them in his life. Amongst the rest, he descried a city ordered after the fairest fashion in the midst of a verdant and radiant land, rich in trees and streams, with gazelles pacing daintily over the plains, whereat he fell a musing and said to himself, "Would I knew the name of yon town and in what land it is." And he took to circling about it and observing it right and left. By this time, the day began to decline and the sun drew near to its downing, and he said in his mind, "Verily I find no goodlier place tonight in than this city. So I will lodge here, and early on the morrow I will return to my kith and kin and my kingdom, and tell my father and family what hath passed, and acquaint him with what mine eyes have seen." Then he addressed himself to seeking a place wherein he might safely bestow himself and his horse, and where none should descry him, and presently behold, he espied a middlemost of the city a palace rising high in upper air, surrounded by a great wall with lofty crenelles and battlements, guarded by 40 black slaves, clad in complete mail and armed with spears and swords, bows and arrows. Quoth he, "This is a goodly place," and turned the descent pin, whereupon the horse sank down with him like a weary bird, and alighted gently on the terrace roof of the palace. So the prince dismounted, and ejaculating Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, FN number 10, he began to go round about the horse and examine it, saying, "By Allah, he who fashioned thee with these perfections was a cunning craftsman, and if the Almighty extend the term of my life and restore me to my country and kinsfolk in safety and reunite me with my father, I will assuredly bestow upon him all manner bounties and benefit him with the utmost beneficence." By this time night had overtaken him, and he sat on the roof till he was assured that all in the palace slept, and indeed hunger and thirst were sore upon him, for that he had not tasted food nor drunk water since he parted from his sire. So he said within himself, "Surely the like of this palace will not lack of victual," and, leaving the horse above, went down in search of somewhat to eat. Presently, he came to a staircase, and descending it to the bottom, found himself in a court paved with white marble and alabaster, which shone in the light of the moon. He marvelled at the place and the goodliness of its fashion, but sensed no sound of speaker and saw no living soul, and stood in perplexed surprise, looking right and left and knowing not whither he should wend. Then said he to himself, "I may not do better than return to where I left my horse and pass the night by it, and as soon as day shall dawn I will mount and ride away." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 359th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that quoth the king's son to himself, I may not do better than pass the night by my horse, and as soon as day shall dawn I will mount and ride away." However, as he tarried talking to himself, he espied a light within the palace, and making towards it, found that it came from a candle that stood before a door of the harem, at the head of a sleeping eunuch, as he were one of the Ifrits of Solomon, or a tribesman of the Jinn, longer than lumber and broader than a bench. He lay before the door, with the pommel of his sword gleaming in the flame of the candle, and at his head was a bag of leather FN number 11, hanging from a column of granite. When the prince saw this, he was affrighted and said, "I crave help from Allah the Supreme. O mine Holy One, even as thou hast already delivered me from destruction, so vouchsafe me strength to quit myself of the adventure of this palace." So saying, he put out his hand to the budget, and taking it, carried it aside and opened it, and found in it food of the best. He ate his fill and refreshed himself and drank water, after which he hung up the provision bag in its place, and drawing the eunuch's sword from its sheath, took it, whilst the slave slept on, knowing not whence destiny should come to him. Then the prince fared forwards into the palace, and ceased not till he came to a second door, with a curtain drawn before it. So he raised the curtain, and behold, on entering he saw a couch of the whitest ivory, inlaid with pearls and jacinths and jewels, and 4 slave girls sleeping about it. He went up to the couch, to see what was thereon, and found a young lady lying asleep, chemised with her hair FN number 12, as she were the full moon rising FN number 13, over the eastern horizon, with flower-white brow and shining hair paring and cheeks like blood-red anemones and dainty moles thereon. He was amazed at her as she lay in her beauty and loveliness, her symmetry and grace, and he recked no more of death. So he went up to her, trembling in every nerve and, shuddering with pleasure, kissed her on the right cheek, whereupon she awoke forthright and opened her eyes, and seeing the prince standing at her head, said to him, "Who art thou, and whence comest thou?" Quoth he, "I am thy slave and thy lover." Asked she, "And who brought thee hither?" And he answered, "My lord and my fortune." Then said Shams al-Nahar FN number 14, for such was her name, Haply thou art he who demanded me yesterday of my father in marriage, and he rejected thee, pretending that thou wast foul of favour. By Allah, my sire lied in his throat when he spoke this thing, for thou art not other than beautiful. Now the son of the king of Hind had sought her in marriage, but her father had rejected him, for that he was ugly and uncouth, and she thought the prince was he. So, when she saw his beauty and grace, for indeed he was like the radiant moon, the syntheism FN number 15, of love that gat hold of her heart as it were a flaming fire, and they fell to talk and converse. Suddenly, her waiting women awoke and, seeing the prince with their mistress, said to her, O my lady, who is this with thee? Quoth she, I know not, I found him sitting by me, when I woke up, haply 'tis he who seeketh me in marriage of my sire. Quoth they, O my lady, by Allah the All-Father, this is not he who seeketh thee in marriage, for he is hideous and this man is handsome and of high degree. Indeed, the other is not fit to be his servant. FN number 16. Then the handmaidens went out to the eunuch, and finding him slumbering awoke him, and he started up in alarm. Said they, How happeth it that thou art on guard at the palace, and yet men come into us, whilst we are asleep? When the black heard this, he sprang in haste to his sword, but found it not, and fear took him and trembling. Then he went in, confounded, to his mistress, and seeing the prince sitting at talk with her, said to him, O my lord, art thou man or jinni? Replied the prince, Woe to thee, O unluckiest of slaves, how darest thou even the sons of the royal Chosroes FN number 17, with one of the unbelieving Satans? And he was as a raging lion. Then he took the sword in his hand and said to the slave, I am the king's son-in-law, and he hath married me to his daughter and bidden me go into her. And when the eunuch heard these words he replied, O my lord, if thou be indeed of kind a man as thou avouchest, she is fit for none but for thee, and thou art worthier of her than any other. Thereupon the eunuch ran to the king, shrieking loud and rending his raiment and heaving dust upon his head, and when the king heard his outcry, he said to him, What hath befallen thee? Speak quickly and be brief, for thou hast fluttered my heart. Answered the eunuch, O king, come to thy daughter's succor, for a devil of the jinn, in the likeness of a king's son, hath got possession of her, so up and at him. When the king heard this, he thought to kill him, and said, How camest thou to be careless of my daughter and let this demon come at her? Then he betook himself to the princess's palace, where he found her slave women standing to await him, and asked them, What is come to my daughter? O king, answered they, slumber overcame us, and, when we awoke, we found a young man sitting upon her couch and talk with her, as he were the full moon. Never saw we aught fairer of favour than he. So we questioned him of his case, and he declared that thou hadst given him thy daughter in marriage. More than this we know not, nor do we know if he be a man or a jinni, but he is modest and well-bred, and doth nothing unseemly or which leadeth to disgrace. Now when the king heard these words, his wrath cooled, and he raised the curtain little by little, and looking in, saw sitting at talk with his daughter a prince of the goodliest, with a face like the full moon for sheen. At this sight he could not contain himself, of his jealousy for his daughter's honour, and, putting aside the curtain, rushed in upon them, drawn sword in hand like a furious ghoul. Now when the prince saw him he asked the princess, Is this thy sire? And she answered, Yes. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 360th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the prince saw the king rushing in upon them, drawn sword in hand, like a furious ghoul, he asked the princess, Is this thy sire? And she answered, Yes. Whereupon he sprang to his feet and, seizing his sword, cried out at the king with so terrible a cry that he was confounded. Then the youth would have fallen on him with the sword, but the king, seeing that the prince was doughtier than he, sheathed his scimitar and stood till the young man came up to him, when he accosted him courteously and said to him, O youth, art thou a man or a jinni? Quoth the prince, did I not respect thy right as mine host and thy daughter's honour, I would spill thy blood. How darest thou fellow me with devils, me that am a prince of the sons of the royal Chosroes who, had they wished to take thy kingdom, could shake thee like an earthquake from thy glory and thy dominions and spoil thee of all thy possessions. Now when the king heard his words, he was confounded with awe and bodily fear of him and rejoined, If thou indeed be of the sons of the kings, as thou pretendest, how cometh it that thou enterest my palace without my permission, and smirchest mine honour, making thy way to my daughter and feigning that thou art her husband and claiming that I have given her to thee to wife, I that have slain kings and kings' sons, who sought her of me in marriage? And now who shall save thee from my might and majesty when, if I cried out to my slaves and servants and bade them put thee to the vilest of deaths, they would slay thee forthright? Who shall deliver thee out of my hand? When the prince heard this speech of the king, he answered, Verily, I wonder at thee and at the shortness and denseness of thy wit. Say me, canst covet for thy daughter a mate comelier than myself, and hast ever seen a stouter-hearted man or one better fitted for a sultan or a more glorious in rank and dominion than I? Rejoined the king, Nay, by Allah. But I would have had thee, O youth, act after the custom of kings and demand her from me to wife before witnesses, that I might have married her to thee publicly, and now, even were I to marry her to thee privily, yet hast thou dishonoured me in her person. Rejoined the prince, Thou sayest sooth, O king, that if thou summon thy slaves and thy soldiers and they fall upon me and slay me, as thou pretendest, thou wouldst but publish thy known disgrace, and the folk would be divided between belief in thee and disbelief in thee. Wherefore, O king, thou wilt do well, meseemeth, to turn from this thought to that which I shall counsel thee. Quoth the king, Let me hear what thou hast to advise. And quoth the prince, What I had to propose to thee is this, either do thou meet me in combat singular, I and thou, and he who slayeth his adversary shall be held the worthier and having a better title to the kingdom, or else, let me be this night and, when as dawns the morn, draw out against me thy horsemen and footmen and servants, but first tell me their number. Said the king, They are 40,000 horse, beside my own slaves and their followers, FN number 18, who are the like of them in number. Thereupon said the prince, When the day shall break, do thou array them against me and say to them. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 361st night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that quoth the prince, When day shall break, do thou array them against me and say to them, This man is a suitor to me for my daughter's hand, on condition that he shall do battle single-handed against you all, for he pretendeth that he will overcome you and put you to the rout, and indeed that ye cannot prevail against him. After which, leave me to do battle with them. If they slay me, then is thy secret surer guarded and thine honour the better warded, and if I overcome them and see their backs, then is it the like of me a king should covet to his son-in-law. So the king approved of his opinion and accepted his proposition, despite his awe at the boldness of his speech and amaze at the pretensions of the prince to meet and fight his whole host, such as he had described to him, being at heart assured that he would perish in the fray and so he should be quit of him and freed from the fear of dishonour. Thereupon he called the eunuch and bade him go to his wazir without stay and delay and command him to assemble the whole of the army and cause them don their arms and armour and mount their steeds. So the eunuch carried the king's order to the minister, who straightway summoned the captains of the host and the lords of the realm and bade them don their harness of daring and mount horse and sally forth in battle array. Such was the case, but as regards the king, he sat a long while conversing with the young prince, being pleased with his wise speech and good sense and fine breeding. And when it was daybreak he returned to his palace and, seating himself on his throne, commanded his merry men to mount and bade them saddle one of the best of the royal steeds with handsome cell and housings and trappings and bring it to the prince. But the youth said, O king, I will not mount horse, till I come in view of the troops and review them. Be it as thou wilt, replied the king. Then the two repaired to the parade ground, where the troops were drawn up, and the young prince looked upon them and noted their great number, after which the king cried out to them, saying, Ho, all ye men, there is come to me a youth who seeketh my daughter in marriage, and in very sooth never have I seen a goodlier than he, no, nor a stouter of heart nor a doughtier of arm, for he pretendeth that he can overcome you, single-handed, and force you to flight, and that, were ye 100,000 in number, yet for him would ye be but few. Now when he chargeth down on you, ye receive him upon point of pike and sharp of sabre, for, indeed, he hath undertaken a mighty matter. Then quoth the king to the prince, Up, O my son, and do thy devour on them. Answered he, O king, thou dealest not justly and fairly by me, how shall I go forth against them, seeing that I am afoot and the men be mounted? The king retorted, I bade thee mount, and thou refusedst, but choose thou which of my horses thou wilt. Then he said, Not one of thy horses pleaseth me, and I will ride none but that on which I came. Asked the king, And where is thy horse? Atop of thy palace. In what part of my palace? On the roof. Now when the king heard these words, he cried out on thee, This is the first sign thou hast given of madness. How can the horse be on the roof? But we shall at once see if thou speak the truth or lies. Then he turned to one of his chief officers and said to him, Go to my palace and bring me what thou findest on the roof. So all the people marveled at the young prince's words, saying one to other, How can a horse come down the steps from the roof? Verily this is a thing whose like we never heard. In the meantime the king's messenger repaired to the palace and mounting to the roof, found the horse standing there, and never had he looked on a handsomer, but when he drew near and examined it, he saw that it was made of ebony and ivory. Now the officer was accompanied by other high officers, who also looked on, and they laughed to one another, saying, Was it of the like of this horse that the youth spake? We cannot deem him other than mad, however, we shall soon see the truth of his case. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 362nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the high officials looked upon the horse, they laughed one to other and said, Was it of the like of his horse that the youth spake? We cannot deem him other than mad, however, we shall soon see the truth of his case. Peradventure herein is some mighty matter, and he is a man of high degree. Then they lifted up the horse bodily and, carrying it to the king, set it down before him, and all the lieges flocked round to look at it, marvelling at the beauty of its proportions and the richness of its saddle and bridle. The king also admired it and wondered at it with extreme wonder, and he asked the prince, O youth, is this thy horse? He answered, Yes, O king, this is my horse, and thou shalt soon see the marvel it showeth. Rejoined the king, Then take and mount it. And the prince retorted, I will not mount till the troops withdraw far from it. So the king bade them retire a bowshot from the horse, whereupon quoth it Sona, O king, see thou, I am about to mount my horse and charge upon thy host and scatter them right and left and split their hearts asunder. Said the king, Do as thou wilt, and spare not their lives, for they will not spare thine. Then the prince mounted, whilst the troops ranged themselves in ranks before him, and one said to another, When the youth cometh between the ranks, we will take him on the points of our pikes and the sharps of our sabres. Quoth another, By Allah, this a mere misfortune, how shall we slay a youth so comely of face and shapely of form? And a third continued, We will have hard work to get the better of him, for the youth had not done this, but for what he knew of his own prowess and pre-eminence of valor. Meanwhile, having settled himself in his saddle, The prince turned the pin of ascent, whilst all eyes were strained to see what he would do, whereupon the horse began to heave and rock and sway to and fro and make the strangest of movements steed ever made, till its belly was filled with air and it took flight with its rider and soared high into the sky. When the king saw this, he cried out to his men, saying, "Woe to you! Catch him, ere he escape you." But his wazirs and viceroys said to him, "O king, can a man overtake the flying bird? This is surely none but some mighty magician or marad of the jinn or devil, and Allah save thee from him. So praise thou the Almighty for deliverance of thee and of all thy host from his hand." Then the king returned to his palace after seeing the feat of the prince and, going in to his daughter, acquainted her with what had befallen them both on the parade ground. He found her grievously afflicted for the prince and bewailing her separation from him, wherefore she fell sick with violent sickness and took to her pillow. Now when her father saw her on this wise, he pressed her to his breast and kissing her between the eyes, said to her, "O my daughter, praise Allah Almighty and thank him for that he hath delivered us from this crafty enchanter, this villain, this low fellow, this thief who thought only of seducing thee." And he repeated to her the story of the prince and how he had disappeared in the firmament, and he abused him and cursed him, knowing not how dearly his daughter loved him. But she paid no heed to his words and did but redouble in her tears and wails, saying to herself, "By Allah, I will neither eat meat nor drain drink, till Allah reunite me with him." Her father was greatly concerned for her case and mourned much over her plight, but, for all he could do to soothe her, love-longing only increased on her. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 363rd night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the king mourned much over his daughter's plight, but, for all he could do to soothe her, love-longing only increased on her." Thus far concerning the king and Princess Shams al-Nahar. But as regards Prince Kamar al-Akbar, when he had risen high in air, he turned his horse's head towards his native land, and being alone mused upon the beauty of the princess and her loveliness. Now he had inquired of the king's people the name of the city and of its king and his daughter, and men had told him that it was the city of Sana. FN number 19, so he journeyed with all speed, till he drew near his father's capital and, making an airy circuit about the city, alighted on the roof of the king's palace, where he left his horse, whilst he descended into the palace and seeing its threshold strewn with ashes, through that one of his family was dead. Then he entered, as of wont, and found his father and mother and sisters clad in mourning raiment of black, all pale of faces and lean of frames. When his sire descried him and was assured that it was indeed his son, he cried out with a great cry and fell down in a fit, but after a time coming to himself, threw himself upon him and embraced him, clipping him to his bosom and rejoicing in him with exceeding joy and extreme gladness. His mother and sisters heard this, so they came in and seeing the prince, fell upon him, kissing him and weeping, and joying with exceeding joyance. Then they questioned him of his case, so he told them all that had passed from first to last, and his father said to him, "Praise be Allah for thy safety, O coolth of my eyes and core of my heart." Then the king bade hold high festival, and the glad tidings flew through the city. So they beat drums and cymbals and, doffing the weed of mourning, they donned the gay garb of gladness and decorated the streets and markets, whilst the folk vied with one another who should be the first to give the king joy, and the king proclaimed a general pardon and opening the prisons, released those who were therein imprisoned. Moreover, he made banquets for the people, with great abundance of eating and drinking, for 7 days and nights, and all creatures were gladsomest, and he took horse with his son and rode out with him, that the folk might see him and rejoice. After a while the prince asked about the maker of the horse, saying, "O my father, what hath fortune done with him?" And the king answered, "Allah never bless him nor the hour wherein I set eyes on him." for he was the cause of thy separation from us, O my son, and he hath lain in jail since the day of thy disappearance. Then the king bade release him from prison and, sending for him, invested him an address of satisfaction and entreated him with the utmost favour and munificence, save that he would not give him his daughter to wife, whereat the sage raged with sore rage and repented of that which he had done, knowing that the prince had secured the secret of the steed and the manner of its motion. Moreover, the king said to his son, I reck thou wilt not to go near the horse henceforth, and more especially not to mount it after this day, for thou knowest not its properties, and belike thou art in error about it. Not the prince had told his father of his adventure with the king of Sanua and his daughter, and he said, had the king intended to kill thee, he had done so, but thine hour was not yet come. When the rejoicings were at an end, the people returned to their places and the king and his son to the palace, where they sat down and fell to eating and drinking and making merry. Now the king had a handsome handmaiden who was skilled in playing the lute, so she took it and began to sweep the strings and sing thereto before the king and his son of separation of lovers, and she chanted the following verses: Deem not that absence breeds in me aught of forgetfulness. What should remember I did you throw my remembrance wane? Time dies but never dies the fondest love for you we bear, and in your love I'll die and in your love I'll rise again. FN number 20. When the prince heard these verses, the fires of longing flamed up in his heart, and pine and passion redoubled upon him. Grief and regret were sore upon him, and his bowels yearned in him for love of the king's daughter of Sanua. So he rose forthright and, escaping his father's notice, went forth the palace to the horse, and mounting it, turned the pin of ascent, whereupon bird-like it flew with him high in air and soared towards the upper regions of the sky. In early morning his father missed him and, going up to the pinnacle of the palace, in great concern, saw his son rising into the firmament, whereat he was sore afflicted and repented in all penitence that he had not taken the horse and hidden it, and he said to himself, By Allah, if but my son return to me, I will destroy the horse, that my heart may be at rest concerning my son. And he fell again to weeping and bewailing himself. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 364th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the king again fell to weeping and bewailing himself for his son. Such was his case, but as regards the prince, he ceased not flying on through air till he came to the city of Sanua and alighted on the roof as before. Then he crept down stealthily and, finding the eunuch asleep, as of wont, raised the curtain and went on little by little, till he came to the door of the princess's alcove FN number 21 chamber and stopped to listen, when lo! He heard her shedding plenteous tears and reciting verses, whilst her women slept round her. Presently, overhearing her weeping and wailing, quoth they, O our mistress, why wilt thou mourn for one who mourneth not for thee? Quoth she, O ye little of wit, is he for whom I mourn of those who forget or who are forgotten? And she fell again to wailing and weeping, till sleep overcame her. Hereat the prince's heart melted for her and his gall-bladder was like to burst. So he entered and, seeing her lying asleep without covering, FN number 22, touched her with his hand, whereupon she opened her eyes and espied him standing by her. Said he, Why all this crying and mourning? And when she knew him, she threw herself upon him, and took him round the neck and kissed him and answered, For thy sake and because of my separation from thee. Said he, O my lady, I have been made desolate by thee all this long time. But she replied, 'Tis thou who hast desolated me, and hast thou tarried longer, I had surely died. Rejoined he, O my lady, what thinkest thou of my case with thy father and how he dealt with me? Were it not for my love of thee, O temptation and seduction of the three worlds, I had certainly slain him and made him a warning to all beholders, but, even as I love thee, so I love him for thy sake. Quoth she, how couldst thou leave me? Can my life be sweet to me after thee? Quoth he, let what hath happened suffice, I am now hungry and thirsty. So she bade her maidens make ready meat and drink, and they sat eating and drinking and conversing till night was well nigh ended, and when day broke he rose to take leave of her and depart, ere the eunuch should awake. Shams al-Nahar asked him, whither goest thou? And he answered, to my father's house, and I plight thee my troth that I will come to thee once in every week. But she wept and said, I conjure thee, by Allah the Almighty, take me with thee whereso thou wendest, and make me not taste anew the bitter good number 23, of separation from thee. Quoth he, wilt thou indeed go with me? And quoth she, yes. Then, said he, arise that we depart. So she rose forthright and going to a chest, arrayed herself in what was richest and dearest to her of her trinkets of gold and jewels of price, and she fared forth, her handmaids recking naught. So he carried her up to the roof of the palace and, mounting the ebony horse, shook her up behind him and made her fast to himself, binding her with strong bonds, after which he turned the shoulder pin of ascent, and the horse rose with him high in air. When her slave women saw this, they shrieked aloud and told her father and mother, who in hot haste ran to the palace roof and looking up, saw the magical horse flying away with the prince and princess. At this the king was troubled with ever-increasing trouble and cried out, saying, O king's son, I conjure thee, by Allah, have ruth on me and my wife and bereave us not of our daughter. The prince made him no reply, but, thinking in himself that the maiden repented of leaving father and mother, asked her, O ravishment of the age, say me, wilt thou that I restore thee to thy mother and father? Whereupon she answered, by Allah, O my lord, that is not my desire, my only wish is to be with thee, wherever thou art, for I am distracted by the love of thee from all else, even from my father and mother. Hearing these words the prince joyed with great joy, and made the horse fly and fare softly with them, so as not to disquiet her, nor did they stay their flight till they came in sight of a green meadow, wherein was a spring of running water. Here they alighted and ate and drank, after which the prince took horse again and set her behind him, binding her in his fear for her safety, after which they fared on till they came in sight of his father's capital. At this, the prince was filled with joy and bethought himself to show his beloved the seat of his dominion and his father's power and dignity and give her to know that it was greater than that of her sire. So he set her down in one of his father's gardens without the city where his parent was wont to take his pleasure, and, carrying her into a domed summer house prepared for the king, left the ebony horse at the door and charged the damsel keep watch over it, saying, sit here till my messenger come to thee, for I go now to my father, to make ready a palace for thee and show thee my royal estate. She was delighted when she heard these words and said to him, do as thou wilt, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 365th night, she said, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the maiden was delighted when she heard these words and said to him, do as thou wilt, for she thereby understood that she should not enter the city but with due honor and worship, as became her rank. Then the prince left her and betook himself to the palace of the king his father, who rejoiced in his return and met him and welcomed him, and the prince said to him, know that I have brought with me the king's daughter of whom I told thee, and have left her without the city in such a garden and come to tell thee, that thou mayst make ready the procession of estate and go forth to meet her and show her thy royal dignity and troops and guards. Answered the king, with joy and gladness, and straightway bade decorate the town with the goodliest adornment. Then he took horse and rode out in all magnificence and majesty, he and his host, high officers and household, with drums and kettle-drums, fifes and clarions and all manner instruments, whilst the prince drew forth of his treasuries jewelry and apparel and what else of the things which kings hoards and made a rare display of wealth and splendor, Moreover, he got ready for the princess a canopied litter of brocades, green, red and yellow, wherein he set Indian and Greek and Abyssinian slave girls. Then he left the litter and those who were therein and preceded them to the pavilion where he had set her down, and searched but found naught, neither princess nor horse. When he saw this, he beat his face, and rent his raiment and began to wander round about the garden, as he had lost his wits, after which he came to his senses and said to himself, how could she have come at the secret of this horse, seeing I told her nothing of it? Maybe the Persian sage who made the horse hath chanced upon her and stolen her away, in revenge for my father's treatment of him. Then he sought the guardians of the garden and asked them if they had seen any pass the precincts, and said, hath any one come in here? Tell me the truth and the whole truth, or I will at once strike off your heads. They were terrified by his threats, but they answered with one voice, we have seen no man enter save the Persian sage, who came to gather healing herbs. So the prince was certified that it was indeed he that had taken away the maiden, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 366th night, she said, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the prince heard their answer, he was certified that the sage has taken away the maiden, and abode confounded and perplexed concerning his case. And he was abashed before the folk, and, turning to his sire, told him what had happened and said to him, take the troops and march them back to the city. As for me, I will never return till I have cleared up this affair. When the king heard this, he wept and beat his breast and said to him, O my son, calm thy choler and master thy chagrin and come home with us and look what king's daughter thou wouldest fain have, that I may marry thee to her. But the prince paid no heed to his words and farewelling him departed, whilst the king returned to the city and their joy was changed into sore annoy. Now, as destiny issued her decree, when the prince left the princess in the garden house and betook himself to his father's palace, for the ordering of his affair, the Persian entered the garden to pluck certain simples and, scenting the sweet savour of musk and perfumes that exhaled from the princess and impregnated the whole place, followed it till he came to the pavilion and saw standing at the door the horse which he had made with his own hands. His heart was filled with joy and gladness, for he had bemoaned its loss much since it had gone out of his hand, so he went up to it and, examining its every part, found it whole and sound, whereupon he was about to mount and ride away, when he bethought himself and said, needs must I first look what the prince hath brought and left here with a horse. So he entered the pavilion and, seeing the princess sitting there, as she were the sun shining sheen in the sky serene, knew her at the first glance to be some high-born lady and doubted not that the prince had brought her thither on the horse and left her in the pavilion, whilst he went to the city, to make ready for her entry in state procession with all splendour. Then he went up to her and kissed the earth between her hands, whereupon she raised her eyes to him and, finding him exceedingly foul of face and favour, asked, Who art thou? And he answered, O my lady, I am a messenger sent by the prince who hath bidden me bring thee to another pleasance nearer the city, for that my lady the queen cannot walk so far and is unwilling, of her joy in thee, that another should forestall her with thee. Quoth she, Where is the prince? And quoth the Persian, He is in the city, with his sire, and forthwith he shall come for thee in great state. Said she, O thou, say me, could he find none handsomer to send to me? Whereat loud laughed the sage and said, Yea verily, he hath not a Mameluke as ugly as I am, but, O my lady, let not the ill favour of my face and the foulness of my form deceive thee. Hast thou profited of me as hath the prince? Verily thou wouldest praise my affair. Indeed, he chose me as his messenger to thee, because of my uncomeliness and loathsomeness in his jealous love of thee, else hath he Mamelukes and negro slaves, pages, eunuchs and attendants out of number, each goodlier than other. When as she heard this, it commended itself to her reason and she believed him, So she rose forthright semicolon, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 367th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the Persian sage acquainted the princess with the case of the king's son, she believed him. So she rose forthright, and, putting her hand in his, said, O my father, what hast thou brought me to ride? He replied, O my lady, thou shalt ride the horse thou camest on. And she, I cannot ride it by myself. Whereupon he smiled and knew that he was her master, and said, I will ride with thee myself. So he mounted and, taking her up behind him, bound her to himself with firm bonds, while she knew not what he would with her. Then he turned the ascent pin, whereupon the belly of the horse became full of wind, and it swayed to and fro like a wave of the sea, and rose with them high in air, nor slackened in its flight, till it was out of sight of the city. Now when Shams al-Nahir saw this, she asked him, Ho thou! What is become of that thou toldest me of my prince, making me believe that he sent thee to me? Answered the Persian, Allah damn the prince! He is a mean and skinflint knave. She cried, Woe to thee! How darest thou disobey thy lord's commandment? Whereto the Persian replied, He is no lord of mine. Knowest thou who I am? Rejoined the princess, I know nothing of thee save what thou toldest me. And retorted he, What I told thee was a trick of mine against thee and the king's son. I have long lamented the loss of this horse which is under us, for I constructed it and made myself master of it. But now I have gotten firm hold of it and of thee too, and I will burn his heart even as he hath burnt mine, nor shall he ever have the horse again, no, never. So be of a good cheer and keep thine eyes cool and clear, for I can be of more use to thee than he, and I am generous as I am wealthy. My servants and slaves shall obey thee as their mistress. I will robe thee in finest raiment, and thine every wish shall be at thy will. When she heard this, she buffeted her face and cried out, saying, Ah, well away! I have not won my beloved, and I have lost my father and mother. And she wept bitter tears over what had befallen her, whilst the sage fared on with her, without ceasing, till he came to the land of the Greeks, Sephen number 24, and alighted in a verdant mead, abounding in streams and trees. Now this meadow lay near a city wherein was a king of high puissance, and it chanced that he went forth that day to hunt and divert himself. As he passed by the meadow, he saw the Persian standing there, with the damsel and the horse by his side, and, before the sage was ware, the king's slaves fell upon him and carried him and the lady and the horse to their master, who, noting the foulness of the man's favour and his loathsomeness and the beauty of the girl and her loveliness, said, O my lady, what kin is this oldester to thee? The Persian made haste to reply, saying, She is my wife and the daughter of my father's brother. But the lady at once gave him the lie and said, O king, by Allah, I know him not, nor is he my husband. Nay, he is a wicked magician who hath stolen me away by force and fraud. Thereupon the king bade bastinado the Persian, and they beat him till he was well nigh dead, after which the king commanded to carry him to the city and cast him into jail, and, taking from him the damsel and the ebony horse, though he knew not its properties nor the secret of its motion, set the girl in his seraglio and the horse amongst his hordes. Such was the case with the sage and the lady, but as regards Prince Kamar al-Akmar, he gabbed himself in travelling gear, and taking what he needed of money, set out tracking their trail in very sorry plight, and journeyed from country to country and city to city, seeking the princess and inquiring after the ebony horse, whilst all who heard him marvelled at him and deemed his talk extravagant. Thus he continued doing a long while, but, for all his inquiry and quest, he could hit on no new news of her. At last he came to her father's city of Sanua and there asked for her, but could get no tidings of her, and found her father mourning her loss. So he turned back and made for the land of the Greeks. continuing to inquire concerning that way as he went, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 368th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the king's son made for the land of the Greeks, continuing to inquire concerning the two as he went along, till, as chance would have it, he alighted at a certain khan and saw a company of merchants sitting at talk. So he sat down near them and heard one say, O my friends, I lately witnessed a wonder of wonders. They asked, What was that? And he answered, I was visiting such a district in such a city, naming the city wherein was the princess, and I heard its people chatting of a strange thing which had lately befallen. It was that the king went out one day hunting and coursing with a company of his courtiers and the lords of his realm, and, issuing from the city, they came to a green meadow where they espied an old man standing, with a woman sitting hard by a horse of ebony. The man was foulest foul of face and loathly of form, but the woman was a marvel of beauty and loveliness and elegance and perfect grace, and as for the wooden horse, it was a miracle. Never saw eyes aught goodlier than it nor more gracious than its make. Asked the others, And what did the king with them? And the merchant answered, As for the man, the king seized him and questioned him of the damsel, and he pretended that she was his wife and the daughter of his paternal uncle, but she gave him the lie forthright and declared that he was a sorcerer and a villain. So the king took her from the old man and bade beat him and cast him into the drunk house. As for the ebony horse, I know not what became of it. When the prince heard these words, he drew near to the merchant and began questioning him discreetly and courteously touching the name of the city and of its king, which when he knew, he passed the night full of joy. And as soon as dawned the day he set out and travelled sans cease till he reached that city, but, when he would have entered, the gatekeepers laid hands on him, that they might bring him before the king to question him of his condition, and the craft in which he was skilled and the cause of his coming thither, such being the usage and custom of their ruler. Now it was supper time when he entered the city, and it was then impossible to go into the king or take counsel with him respecting the stranger. So the guards carried him to the jail, thinking to lay him by the heels for the night, but, when the warders saw his beauty and loveliness, they could not find it in their hearts to imprison him. They made him sit with them without the walls, and, when food came to them, he ate with them what sufficed him. As soon as they had made an end of eating, they turned to the prince and said, What countryman art thou? I come from Fars, answered he, the land of the Chosroes. When they heard this they laughed, and one of them said, O Chosroan, FN number 25. I have heard the talk of men and their histories, and I have looked into their conditions, but never saw I or heard I a bigger liar than the Chosroan which is with us in the jail. Quoth another, And never did I see aught fouler than his favour or more hideous than his visnomy. Asked the prince, What have ye seen of his lying? And they answered, He pretendeth that he is one of the wise. Now the king came upon him, as he went a-hunting, and found with him a most beautiful woman and a horse of the blackest ebony. Never saw I a handsome. As for the damsel, she is with the king, who is enamoured of her and would fain marry her, but she is mad, and were this man a leech as he claimeth to be, he would have healed her, for the king doth his utmost to discover a cure for her case and a remedy for her disease, and this whole year past hath he spent treasure upon physicians and astrologers, on her account, but none can avail to cure her. As for the horse, it is in the royal hoard house, and the ugly man is here with us in prison, and as soon as night falleth, he weepeth and bemoaneth himself and will not let us sleep. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 369th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the warders had recounted the case of the Persian negromancer they held in prison and his weeping and wailing, the prince at once devised a device whereby he might compass his desire, and presently the guards of the gate, being minded to sleep, led him into the jail and locked the door. So he overheard the Persian weeping and bemoaning himself, in his own tongue, and saying, Alack, alas for my sin, that I sinned against myself and against the king's son, in that which I did with the damsel, for I neither left her nor won my will of her. All this cometh of my lack of sense, in that I sought for myself that which I deserved not and which befitted not the like of me, for whoso seeketh what switeth him not at all, falleth with the like of my fall. Now when the king's son heard this, he accosted him in Persian, saying, How long will this weeping and wailing last? Say me, thinkest thou that hath befallen thee that which never befell other than thou? Now when the Persian heard this, he made friends with him and began to complain to him of his case and misfortunes. And as soon as the morning morrowed, the warders took the prince and carried him before the king, informing him that he had entered the city on the previous night, at a time when audience was impossible. Quoth the king to the prince, Whence comest thou and what is thy name and trade and why hast thou travelled hither? He replied, As to my name I am called in Persian Haja, FN number 26, as to my country I come from the land of Fars, and I am of the men of art and especially of the art of medicine and healing the sick and those whom the jinns drive mad. For this I go round about all countries and cities, to profit by adding knowledge to my knowledge, and whenever I see a patient I heal him, and this is my graft. FN number 27. Now when the king heard this, he rejoiced with exceeding joy and said, O excellent sage, thou hast indeed come to us at a time when we need thee. Then he acquainted him with the case of the princess, adding, If thou cure her and recover her from her madness, thou shalt have of me everything thou seekest. Replied the prince, Allah save and favour the king, describe to me all thou hast seen of her insanity and tell me how long it is since the access attacked her, also how thou camest by her and the horse and the sage. So the king told him the whole story, from first to last, adding, The sage has in goal. Quoth the prince, O auspicious king, and what hast thou done with the horse? Quoth the king, O youth, it is with me yet, laid up in one of my treasure chambers. Whereupon said the prince within himself, The best thing I can do is first to see the horse and assure myself of its condition. If it be whole and sound, all will be well and end well, but, if its motorworks be destroyed, I must find some other way of delivering my beloved. Thereupon he turned to the king and said to him, O king, I must see the horse in question. Haply I may find in it somewhat that will serve me for the recovery of the damsel. With all my heart, replied the king, and taking him by the hand, showed him into the place where the horse was. The prince went round about it, examining its condition, and found it whole and sound, whereat he rejoiced greatly and said to the king, Allah save and exalt the king. I would fain go into the damsel, that I may see how it is with her. For I hope in Allah to heal her by my healing hand through means of the horse. Then he bade them take care of the horse, and the king carried him to the princess's apartment where her lover found her wringing her hands and writhing and beating herself against the ground, and tearing her garments to tatters as was her wont, but there was no madness of jinn in her, and she did this but that none might approach her. When the prince saw her thus, he said to her, No harm shall betide thee, O ravishment of the three worlds, and went on to soothe her and speak her fair, till he managed to whisper, I am Kamar al-Akmar, whereupon she cried out with a loud cry and fell down fainting for excess of joy, but the king thought this was epilepsy. FN number 28, brought on by her fear of him, and by her suddenly being startled. Then the prince put his mouth to her ear and said to her, O Shams al-Nahar, O seduction of the universe, have a care for thy life and mine and be patient and constant, for this our position needeth sufferance and skilful contrivance to make shift for our delivery from the tyrannical king. My first move will be now to go out to him and tell him that thou art possessed of a jinn and hence thy madness, but that I will engage to heal thee and drive away the evil spirit, if he will at once unbind thy bonds. So when he cometh into thee, do thou speak him smooth words, that he may think I have cured thee, and all will be done for us as we desire. Quoth she, hearkening and obedience, and he went out to the king in joy and gladness, and said to him, O august king, I have, by thy good fortune, discovered her disease and its remedy, and have cured her for thee. So now do thou go into her and speak her softly and treat her kindly, and promise her what may please her, so shall all thou desirest of her be accomplished to thee. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 370th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the prince feigned himself a leech and went into the damsel and made himself known to her and told her how he purposed to deliver her, she cried hearkening and obedience. He then fared forth from her and sought the king and said, Go thou into her and speak her softly and promise her what may please her, so shall all thou desirest of her be accomplished to thee. Thereupon the king went into her, and when she saw him, she rose and kissing the ground before him, bade him welcome and said, I admire how thou hast come to visit thy handmaid this day. Whereat he was ready to fly for joy, and bade the waiting women and the eunuchs attend her and carry her to the hammam and make ready for her dresses and adornment. So they went into her and saluted her, and she returned their salams with the goodliest language and after the pleasantest fashion, whereupon they clad her in royal apparel and, clasping a collar of jewels about her neck, carried her to the bath and served her there. Then they brought her forth, as she were the full moon, and, when she came into the king's presence, she saluted him and kissed ground before him, whereupon he joyed in her with joy exceeding and said to the prince, O sage, O philosopher, all this is of thy blessing. Allah increase to us the benefit of thy healing breath. FN number 29, the prince replied, O king, for the completion of her cure it behoveth that thou go forth, thou and all thy troops and guards, to the place where thou foundest her, not forgetting the beast of black wood which was with her, for therein is a devil, and, unless I exorcise him, he will return to her and afflict her at the head of every month. With love and gladness, cried the king, O thou prince of all philosophers and most learned of all who see the light of day. Then he brought out the ebony horse to the meadow in question and rode thither with all his troops and the princess, little weeting the purpose of the prince. Now when they came to the appointed place, the prince, still habited as a leech, bade them set the princess and the steed as far as I could reach from the king and his troops, and said to him, With thy leave, and at thy word, I will now proceed to the fumigations and conjurations, and here imprison the adversary of mankind, that he may never more return to her. After this, I shall mount this wooden horse which seemeth to be made of ebony, and take the damsel up behind me, whereupon it will shake and sway to and fro and fare forwards, till it come to thee, when the affair will be at an end, and after this thou mayst do with her as thou wilt. When the king heard his words, he rejoiced with extreme joy, so the prince mounted the horse and, taking the damsel up behind him, whilst the king and his troops watched him, bound her fast to him. Then he turned the ascending pin and the horse took flight and soared with them high in air, till they disappeared from every eye. After this the king abode half the day, expecting their return, but they returned not. So when he despaired of them, repenting him greatly of that which he had done and grieving sore for the loss of the damsel, he went back to the city with his troops. He then sent for the Persian who was in prison and said to him, O thou traitor, O thou villain, why didst thou hide from me the mystery of the ebony horse? And now a sharper hath come to me and hath carried it off, together with a slave girl whose ornaments are worth a mint of money, and I shall never see anyone or anything of them again. So the Persian related to him all his past, first and last, and the king was seized with a fit of fury which well nigh ended his life. He shut himself up in his palace for a while, mourning and afflicted, but at last his wazirs came in to him and applied themselves to comfort him, saying, Verily, he who took the damsel is an enchanter, and praise be Allah who hath delivered thee from his craft and sorcery. And they ceased not from him, till he was comforted for her loss. Thus far concerning the king, but as for the prince, he continued his career towards his father's capital in joy and cheer, and stayed not till he alighted on his own palace, where he set the lady in safety, after which he went into his father and mother and saluted them and acquainted them with her coming, whereat they were filled with solace and gladness. Then he spread great banquets for the townsfolk, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 371st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the king's son spread great banquets for the townsfolk, and they held high festival a whole month, at the end of which time he went into the princess, and they took their joy of each other with exceeding joy. Let us further break the ebony horse in pieces and destroyed its mechanism for flight. Moreover, the prince wrote a letter to the princess's father, advising him of all that had befallen her and informing him how she was now married to him and in all health and happiness, and sent it by a messenger, together with costly presents and curious rarities. And when the messenger arrived at the city which was Sanua and delivered the letter and the presents to the king, he read the missive and rejoiced greatly thereat and accepted the presents, honoring and rewarding the bearer handsomely. Moreover, he forwarded rich gifts to his son-in-law by the same messenger, who returned to his master and acquainted him with what had passed, whereat he was much cheered. And after this the prince wrote a letter every year to his father-in-law and sent him presents till, in course of time, his sire King Sabur deceased and he reigned in his stead, ruling justly over his lieges and conducting himself well and righteously towards them, so that the land submitted to him and his subjects did him loyal service, and Kamar al-Akmar and his wife Shams al-Nahar abode in the enjoyment of all satisfaction and solace of life, till there came to them the destroyer of delegates and sunderer of societies, the plunderer of palaces, the caterer for cemeteries and the garnerer of graves. And now glory be to the living one who dieth not and in whose hand is the dominion of the worlds visible and invisible. Moreover, I have heard tell the tale of Uns al-Wujud, and there was his daughter al-Ward fil Akmam or Rose in Hood. FN number 30. There was once, in days of yore and in ages and times long gone before, a king of great power and lord of glory and dominion galore, who had a Wazir Ibrahim height, and this Wazir's daughter was a damsel of extraordinary beauty and loveliness, gifted with passing brilliancy and the perfection of grace, possessed of abundant wit, and in all good breeding complete. But she loved wassail and wine and the human face divine and choice verses and rare stories, and the delicacy of her inner gifts invited all hearts to love, even as saith the poet, describing her. Like moon she shines amid the starry sky, robing in dresses blackest ink out thee. The morning breezes give her boughs fair drink, and like a branch she sways with supple ply, she smiles in passing us. O thou that art fairest in yellow-robed, O Cramoisy, thou playest with my wit in love, as though sparrow in hand of playful boy were I. FN number 31. Her name was Rose in Hood, and she was so named for her young and tender beauty and the freshness of her brilliancy. And the king loved her in his cups because of her accomplishments and fine manners. Now it was the king's custom yearly to gather together all the nobles of his realm and play with the ball. FN number 32. So when the day came round whereon the folk assembled for ball play, the minister's daughter seated herself at a lattice, to divert herself by looking on at the game, and, as they were at play, her glance fell upon a youth among the guards than whom never was seen a comelier face nor a goodlier form, for he was bright of favour, showing white teeth when he smiled, tall-statured and broad-shouldered. She looked at him again and could not take her fill of gazing, and presently said to her nurse, "What is the name of yonder handsome young man among the troops?" Replied the nurse, "O my daughter, the dear fellows are all handsome." "Which of them dost thou mean?" Said Rose in Hood, "Wait till he come past and I will point him out to thee." So So she took an apple and as he rode by dropped it on him, whereupon he raised his head, to see who did this, and espied the wazir's daughter at the window, as she were the moon of fullest light in the darkness of the night, nor did he withdraw his eyes, till his heart was utterly lost to her, and he recited these lines. Wast archer shot me, or wast thine eyes ruined lover's heart that thy charms espies? Was the notched shaft FN number 33, from a host outshot, or from latticed window in sudden guise? When the game was at an end, and all had left the ground, she asked her nurse, What is the name of that youth I showed thee? And the good woman answered, His name is Ens Al-Wujud, whereat Rosin Hood shook her head and lay down on her couch, with thoughts say fire for love. Then, sighing deeply, she improvised these couplets. He missed not who dubbed thee, world's delight, a world's love conjoining to bounty's light. FN number 34, O thou, whose favour the full moon favours, whose charms make life and the living bright. Thou hast none equal among mankind, Sultan of beauty, and profile sight, thine eyebrows are likest a well-formed nun. FN number 35, and thine eyes are sad. FN number 36, by his hand indict, thy shape is the soft, green bow that gives when asked to all with all gracious sprite, thou excellest knights of the world in store, with delight and beauty and bounty dight. When she had finished her verses, she wrote them on a sheet of paper, which she folded in a piece of golf-embroidered silk and placed under her pillow. Now one of her nurses had seen her, so she came up to her and held her in talk till she slept, when she stole the scroll from under her pillow, and, after reading it, knew that she had fallen in love with Ens Al-Wujud. Then she returned the scroll to its place, and when her mistress awoke, she said to her, O my lady, indeed I am to thee a true counsellor and am tenderly anxious on thy account. Know that love is a tyrant and the hiding it melteth iron and entaileth sickness and unease, nor for whoso confesseth it is there aught of reproach. Rejoined Rosin Hood, and what is the medicine of passion, O nurse mine? Answered the nurse, the medicine of passion is enjoyment, quoth she, and how may one come by enjoyment? Quoth the other, by letters and messages, my lady, by whispered words of compliment and by greetings before the world. FN number 37, all this bringeth lovers together and makes hard matters easy. So if thou have aught at heart, mistress mine, I am the fittest to keep thy secret and do thy desires and carry thy letters. Now when the damsel heard this, her reason flew and fled for joy, but she restrained herself from speech till she should see the issue of the matter, saying within herself, None knoweth this thing of me, nor will I trust this one with my secret, till I have tried her. Then said the woman, O my lady, I saw in my sleep as though a man came to me and said, Thy mistress and Ens Al-Wujud love each other, so do thou serve the case by carrying their messages and doing their desires and keeping their secrets, and much good shall befall thee. So now I have told thee my vision and it is thine to decide. Quoth Rosin Hood, after she heard of the dream, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 372nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Rosin Hood asked her nurse after hearing of the dream, Tell me, canst thou keep a secret, O my nurse? Whereto she answered, And how should I not keep secrecy, I that am of the flower of the free? FN number 38, then the maiden pulled out the scroll, whereon she had written the verses and said, Carry me this my letter to Ens Al-Wujud and bring me his reply. The nurse took the letter and, repairing to Ens Al-Wujud, kissed his hands and greeted him right courteously, then gave him the paper, and he read it and, comprehending the contents, wrote on the back these couplets. I soothe my heart and my love rebel, but my state interprets my love too well. When tears flow I tell them mine eyes are ill, lest the censor see and my case foretell. I was fancy free and knew I love, but I fell in love and in madness fell. I show you my case and complain of pain, bine and ecstasy that your ruth compel, I write you with tears of eyes, so belike they explain the love can my heart to quell. I'll guard a face that is veiled with charms, whose thrall is moon and the stars as well. In her beauty I never beheld the like, from her sway the branches learn sway and swell. I beg you, and 'tis not too much of pains, to call FN number 39, 'twere a boon without parallel. I give you a soul you will happily take, to which union is heaven, disunion hell. Then he folded the letter and kissing it, gave it to the go-between and said to her, O nurse, incline the lady's heart to me. To hear is to obey, answered she, and carried the script to her mistress, who kissed it and laid it on her head. Then she opened it and read it and understood it and wrote at the foot of it these couplets. O whose heart by our beauty is captive ta'en, have patience and all thou shalt happily gain. When we knew that thy love was a true effect, and what pained a heart to thy heart gave pain, we had granted thee wished for call and more, that hindered so doing the Chamberlain. When the night grows dark, through our love's success fire burns our vitals with might and main, and sleep from our beds is driven afar, and our bodies are tortured by passion bane. Hide love. In love's code is the first command, and from raising his veil thy hand restrain. I fell love fulfilled by yon gazelle, would he never wander from where I dwell. Then she folded the letter and gave it to the nurse, who took it and went out from her mistress to seek the young man. But, as she would fare forth, the Chamberlain met her and said to her, Whither away? To the bath, answered she, but in her fear and confusion, she dropped the letter, without knowing it, and went off and recking what she had done, when one of the eunuchs, seeing it lying in the way, picked it up. When the nurse came without the door, she sought for it, but found it not, so turned back to her mistress and told her of this and what had befallen her. Meanwhile, the wazir came out of the harem and seated himself on his couch, whereupon behold, the eunuch, who had picked up the letter, came into him, handing it in hand and said, O my lord, I found this paper lying upon the floor and picked it up. So the minister took it from his hand, folded as it was, and opening it, read the verses as above set down. Then, after mastering the meaning, he examined the writing and knew it for his daughter's hand, whereupon he went to her mother, weeping so abundant tears that his beard was wetted. His wife asked him, What maketh thee weep, O my lord? And he answered, Take this letter and see what is therein. So she took it and found it to be a love letter from her daughter Rose in Hud to Uns al-Wujud, whereupon the ready drops sprang to her eyes, but she composed her mind, and, gulping down her tears, said to her husband, O my lord, there is no profit in weeping, the right course is to cast about for a means of keeping thine honour and concealing the affair of thy daughter. And she went on to comfort him and lighten his trouble, but he said, I am fearful for my daughter by reason of this new passion. Knowest thou not that the Sultan loveth Uns al-Wujud with exceeding love? And my fear hath two causes. The first concerneth myself, it is, that she is my daughter, the second is on account of the king, for that Uns al-Wujud is a favourite with the Sultan and peradventure great troubles shall come out of this affair. What deemest thou should be done? And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 373rd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the wazir, after recounting the affair of his daughter, asked his wife, What deemest thou should be done? And she answered, Have patience whilst I pray the prayer for right direction. So she prayed a two-bow prayer according to the prophetic FN number 40, ordinance for seeking divine guidance, after which she said to her husband, In the midst of the sea of treasures FN number 41, standeth a mountain named the Mount of the Bereaved Mother, the cause of which being so called shall presently follow in its place, Inshallah, and thither can none have access, save with pains and difficulty and distress, do thou make that same her abiding place. Accordingly the minister and his wife agreed to build on that mountain a virgin castle and lodge their daughter therein with the necessary provision to be renewed year by year and attendants to cheer and to serve her. Accordingly he collected carpenters, builders and architects and dispatched them to the mountain, where they builded her an impregnable castle, never saw eyes the like thereof. Then he made ready vivers and carriage for the journey and, going into his daughter by night, bade her prepare to set out on a pleasure excursion. Thereupon her heart presaged the sorrows of separation and, when she went forth and saw the preparations from the journey, she wept with sore weeping and wrote that upon the door which might acquaint her lover with what had passed and with the transports of passion and grief that were upon her, transports such as would make the flesh to shiver and hair to stare, and melt the hardest stone with care, and tear from every eye a tear. And what she wrote were these couplets. By Allah, O thou house, if my beloved a morn go by, and greet with signs and signals lover ere is wont to fly, I pray thee give him our salams in pure and fragrant guise, for he indeed may never know where we this eve shall lie. I wot not whither they have fared, thus bearing us afar at speed, and lightly quipped, the lighter from one love to fly, when darkens night. The birds in brake or branches snugly perched wail for our sorrow and announce our hapless destiny. The tongue of their condition saith, Alas, alas for woe, and heavy brunt of parting blow two lovers must abide. When viewed thy separation cups were filled to the brim and us with merest sorrow wine fate came so fast to ply. I mixed them with becoming share of patience self to excuse, but patience from the loss of you her solace doth refuse. Now when she ended her lines, she mounted and they set forward with her, crossing and cutting over wold and wild and riant dale and rugged hill, till they came to the shore of the sea of treasures. Here they pitched their tents and built her a great ship, wherein they went down with her and her suite and carried them over to the mountain. The minister had ordered them, on reaching the journey's end, to set her in the castle and to make their way back to the shore, where they were to break up the vessel. So they did his binding and returned home, weeping over what had befallen. Such was the case, but as regards Ansalujud, he arose from sleep and prayed the dawn prayer, after which he took horse and rode forth to attend upon the Sultan. On his way, he passed by the Wazir's house, thinking perchance to see some of his followers as of wont, but he saw no one and, looking upon the door, he read written thereon the verses aforesaid. At this sight, his senses failed him, fire was kindled in his vitals and he returned to his lodging, where he passed the day in trouble and transports of grief, without finding ease or patience, till night darkened upon him, when his yearning and love-longing redoubled. Thereupon, by way of concealment, he disguised himself in the ragged garb of a fakir, FN number 42, and set out wandering at random through the glooms of night, distracted and knowing not whither he went. So he wandered on all that night and next day, till the heat of the sun waxed fierce and the mountains flamed like fire and thirst was grievous upon him. Presently, he espied a tree, by whose side was a thin thread of running water, so he made towards it and sitting down in the shade, on the bank of the rivulet, essayed to drink, but found that the water had no taste in his mouth. FN number 43, and, indeed his colour had changed and his face had yellowed, and his feet were swollen with travel and travail. So he shed copious tears and repeated these couplets. The lover is drunken with love of friend, on a longing that groweth his joys depend, love distracted, ardent, bewildered, lost from home, nor may food aught of pleasure lend. How can life be delightsome to one in love, and from lover parted, to estrange, unkenned? I melt with the fire of my pine for them, and the tears down my cheek in a stream descend. Shall I see them, say me, or one that comes from the camp, who th afflicted heart shall tend? And after thus reciting he wept till he wetted the hard dry ground, but none without loss of time he rose and fared on again over waste and wold, till there came out upon him a lion, with a neck buried in tangled mane, a head the bigness of a dome, a mouth wider than the door thereof and teeth like elephants' tusks. Now when Uns al-Wujud saw him, he gave himself up for lost, and turning FN number 44, towards the temple of Mecca, pronounced the professions of the faith and prepared for death. He had read in books that whoso will flatter the lion, beguileth him, FN number 45, for that he is readily duped by smooth speech and gentled by being glorified. So he began and said, O Lion of the forest, O Lord of the waste, O terrible Leo, O Father of fighters, O Sultan of wild beasts. Behold, I am a lover in longing, whom passion and severance have been wronging. Since I parted from my dear, I have lost my reasoning gear, wherefore, to my speech do thou give ear and have ruth on my passion and hope and fear. When the lion heard this, he drew back from him and sitting down on his hind quarters, raised his head to him and began to frisk tail and paws, which when Uns al-Wujud saw, he recited these couplets. Lion of the wold, wilt thou murder me, ere I meet her who doomed me to slavery? I am not game and I bear no fat, for the loss of my love makes me sickness dree, and estrangement from her hath so worn me down I am like a shape in a shroud we see. O thou sire of spoils, FN number 46, O thou lion of war, give not my pains to the blamers gree. I burn with love, I am drowned in tears for a parting from lover, sore misery. And my thoughts of her in the murk of night for love hath make my being and be. As he had finished his lines the lion rose, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 374th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that as Uns al-Wujud ended his lines, the lion arose and stalked slowly up to him, with eyes tear-railing, and licked him with his tongue, then walked on before him, signing to him as though saying, Follow me. So he followed him, and the beast ceased not leading him on for a while till he brought him up a mountain, and guided him to the farther side, where he came upon the track of a caravan over the desert, and knew it to be that of Rose in Hood and her company. Then he took the drayland, when the lion saw that he knew the track for that of the party which escorted her. He turned back and went his way, whilst Uns al-Wujud walked along the footmarks day and night, till they brought him to the dashing sea, swollen with clashing surge. The trail led down to the sandy shore and it broke off, whereby he knew that they had taken ship and had continued their journey by water. So he lost hope of finding his lover, and with hot tears he repeated these couplets. Far as the fame and patience faileth me, how can I seek them? FN number 47, or the abysmal sea, or how be patient, when my vitals burn for love of them, and sleep waxed insomny. Since the sad day they left the home and fled, my heart's consumed by love's ardency. Seyhun, Jehun, FN number 48, Euphrates like my tears, make flood no deluged rain it like can see, mine eyelids chafed with running tears remain. My heart from fiery sparks is never free. The hosts of love and longing pressed me and made the hosts of patience break and flee. I've risked my life too freely for their love, and risk of life the least of ills shall be. Allen punish I that saw those gems enshrined, and passing full moon's brilliancy. I found me felled by fair wide-opened eyes, which pierced my heart with stringless archery, and soft, lithe, swaying shape enraptured me as sway the branches of the willow tree, with my covet union that I win, all of pain's cock and care, a mastery. For love of them I mourn and eve I pine, and doubt all came to me from evil ear. And when his lines were ended he wept, till he swooned away, and abode in his swoon a long while, but as soon as he came to himself, he looked right and left, and seeing no one in the desert, he became fearful of the wild beasts, so he clomb to the top of a high mountain, where he heard the voice of a son of Adam speaking within a cave. He listened, and lo! They were the accents of a devotee, who had forsworn the world and given himself up to pious works and worship. He knocked thrice at the cavern door, but the hermit made him no answer, neither came forth to him, Wherefore he groaned aloud and recited these couplets. What pathway find I my desire to obtain? How scape from care and cark and pain and bane? All terrors join to make me old and hoar of head and heart, ere youth from me is ta'en, nor find I any aid my passion, nor a friend to lighten load of bane and pain. How great and many troubles I've endured, fortune hath turned her back I see and fain. Ah mercy, mercy on the lover's heart, doomed cup of parting and desertion drain. A fire is in his heart, his vitals waste, and severance made his reason vainest vain. How dread the day I came to her abode and saw the writ they wrote on doorway lane. I wept, till gave I earth to drink my grief, but still to near and far FN number 49, I did but feign. Then strayed I till in waste a lion sprang on me, and but for flattering words had slain. I soothed him, so he spared me and lent me aid, he too might haply of love's taste complain. O devotee, that hidest in thy cave, meseems eke thou hast learned love's might and main, but if, at end of woes, with my league, straight I'll forget all suffering and fatigue. Hardly had he made an end of these verses when, behold, the door of the cavern opened and he heard one say, alas, the pity of it. FN number 50. So he entered and saluted the devotee, who returned his salam and asked him, what is thy name? Answered the young man, and Al-Wujud. And what caused thee to come hither? Quoth the hermit. So he told him his story in its entirety, omitting naught of his misfortunes, whereat he wept and said, O Ans Al-Wujud, these 20 years have I passed in this place, but never beheld I any man here, until yesterday, when I heard a noise of weeping and lamentation and, looking forth in the direction of the sound, saw many people and tents pitched on the seashore, and the party at once proceeded to build a ship, in which certain of them embarked and sailed over the waters. Then some of the crew returned with the ship and breaking it up, went their way, and I suspect that those who embarked in the ship and returned not, are they whom thou seekest. In that case, O Ans Al-Wujud, thy grief must needs be great and sore, and thou art excusable, though never yet was lover but suffered love longing. Then he recited these couplets. Ans Al-Wujud, dost deem me fancy free, when pine and longing slay and quicken me. I have known love and yearning from the years since mother milk I drank, nor e'er was free. Long struggled I with love, till learned his might. Ask thou of him, he'll tell with willing gree. Lovesick and pining drank I passion cup, and well nigh perished in mine agony. Strong was I, but my strength to weakness turned, and I sought break through patience armory, hope not to win love joys, without annoy, contrary ever links with contrary. But fear and not change from lover true, be true unto thy wish, some day thine own 'twill be. Love hath forbidden to his votaries relinquishment as deadliest heresy. The eremite, having ended his verse, rose and, coming up to Ans Al-Wujud, embraced him, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 375th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the eremite having ended his verse, rose and coming up to Ans Al-Wujud embraced him, and they wept together, till the hills rang with their cries and they fell down fainting. When they revived, they swore brotherhood FN number 51, in Allah Almighty, after which said Ans Al-Wujud, this very night will I pray to God and seek of him direction FN number 52, anent what thou shouldst do to attain thy desire. Thus it was with them, but as regards Rosin Hood, when they brought her to the mountain and set her in the castle and she beheld its ordering, she wept and exclaimed, By Allah, thou art a goodly place, save that thou lackest in thee the presence of the beloved. FN number 53. Then seeing birds in the island, she bade her people set snares for them and put all they caught in cages within the castle, and they did so. But she sat at a lattice and bethought her of what had passed, and desire and passion and distraction redoubled upon her, till she burst into tears and repeated these couplets. O to whom now, of my desire complaining sore, shall I bewail my parting from my fear compelled thus to fly? Flames rage within what underlies my ribs, yet hide them I in deepest secret, dreading I the jealous hostile spy. I am grown as lean, attenuate as any pick of tooth. FN number 54, by sore estrangement, absence, ardour, ceaseless sob and sigh. Where is the eye of my beloved to see how I am become like tree stripped bare of leafage, left to linger and to die? They tyrannized over me whom they confined in place where to the lover of my heart may never draw him nigh. I beg the sun for me to give greetings 1,000-fold, at time of rising and again when setting from the sky, to the beloved one who shames a full moon's loveliness, when shows that slender form that doth the willow branch out thee. If Rose herself would even with his cheek, I say of her thou art not like it if to me my portion thou deny. FN number 55, his honey-dew of lips is like the grateful water draught would cool me when a fire in heart upflammeth fierce and high. How shall I give him up who is my heart and soul of me, my malady my wasting cause, my love, sole leech of me? Then, as the glooms of night closed around her, her yearning increased and she called to mind the past and recited also these couplets. 'Tis dark, my transport and unease now gather might and main, and love desire provoketh me to wake my wonted pain. The pang of parting takes forever place within my breast, and pining makes me desolate in destitution lain. Ecstasy sore maltreats my soul and yearning burns my sprite, and tears betray love's secrecy which I would lief contain. I weet no way, I know no case that can make light my load, or heal my wasting body, or cast out from me this bane. A hell of fire is in my heart up flames with lambent tongue, and Lars's furnace fires within my liver place have ta'en. O thou, exaggerating blame for what befell, enough I bear with patience whatso hath writ for me the ben. I swear, by Allah, ne'er to find aught comfort for their loss, 'tis oath of passion's children and their oaths are ne'er in vain. O night, salams of me to friends, and let to them be known of thee true knowledge how I wake and waking ever wone. Meanwhile, the hermit said to Uns al-Wujud, go down to the palm grove in the valley and fetch some fibre. FN number 56, so he went and returned with the palm fibre, which the hermit took and, twisting into ropes, make therewith a net. FN number 57, such as is used for carrying straw, after which he said, O Uns al-Wujud, in the heart of the valley groweth a gourd, which springeth up and treeth upon its roots. Go down there and fill this sack therewith, then tie it together and, casting it into the water, embark thereon and make for the mist of the sea, so haply thou shalt win thy wish, for whoso never ventureth shall not have what he seeketh. I hear and obey, answered Uns al-Wujud. Then he bade the hermit farewell after the holy man had prayed for him, and, betaking himself to the soul of the valley, did as his adviser had counselled him, made the sack, launched it upon the water, and pushed from shore. Then there rose a wind, which drave him out to sea, till he was lost to the eremite's view, and he ceased not to float over the abysses of the ocean, one billow tossing him up and another bearing him down, and he beholding the while the dangers and marvels of the deep, for the space of 3 days. At the end of that time fate cast him upon the mount of the bereft mother, where he landed, giddy and tottering like a chicken fledged, and at the last of his strength for hunger and thirst, but, finding the streams flowing and birds on the branches cooing and fruit-laden trees in clusters and singly growing, he ate of the fruits and drank of the rills. Then he walked on till he saw some white thing far off, and making for it, found that it was a strongly fortified castle. So he went up to the gate, and seeing it locked, sat down by it, and there he sat for 3 days, when behold, the gate opened and an eunuch came out, who finding Uns al-Wujud there seated, said to him, Whence camest thou and who brought thee hither? Quoth he, From Ispahan, and I was voyaging with merchandise when my ship was wrecked and the waves cast me upon the farther side of this island. Whereupon the eunuch wept and embraced him, saying, Allah preserve thee, O thou friendly face. Ispahan is mine own country, and I have there a cousin, the daughter of my father's brother, whom I loved from my childhood and cherished with fond affection, but a people stronger than we fell upon us in foray, and taking me among other booty, cut off my yard FN number 58, and sold me for a castrato, whilst I was yet a lad, and this is how I came to be in such case. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 376th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the eunuch who came forth from the castle, where Rose-in Hood was confined, told Ens al-Wujud all his tale and said, The raiders who captured me cut off my yard and sold me for a castrato, and this is how I came to be in such case. FN number 59, and after saluting him and wishing him long life, the eunuch carried him into the courtyard of the castle, where he saw a great tank of water, surrounded by trees, on whose branches hung cages of silver, with doors of gold, and therein birds were warbling and singing the praises of the requiting king. And when he came to the first cage he looked in, and lo! A turtle dove, on seeing him, raised her voice and cried out, saying, O thou bounty fraught! Whereat he fell down fainting, and after coming to himself, he sighed heavily and recited these couplets. O turtle dove, like me art thou distraught? Then pray the Lord and sing, O bounty fraught! Would I knew and thy moan were sign of joy, or cry of love desire in heart inwrought, and moan thou pining for a lover gone who left thee woe begone to pine in thought, or if like me hast lost thy fondest friend, and severance long desire to memory brought? O Allah, guard a faithful lover's lot, I will not leave her though my bones go rot. Then, after ending his verses, he fainted again, and, presently reviving, he went on to the second cage, wherein he found a ring-dove. When it saw him, it sang out, O Eternal, I thank thee. And he groaned and recited these couplets. I heard a ring-dove chanting plaintively, I thank thee, O Eternal, for this misery. Haply, perchance, may Allah, of his grace, send me by this long round my love to see. Full oft FN number 60, she comes with honeyed lips dark red, and heaps a plow upon love's ardency. Quoth I, while longing fires flame high and fierce in heart, and wasting life's vitality, and tears like gouts of blood go railing down in torrents over cheeks now pale of blee, none yet trod earth that was not born to woe, but I will patient dream mine agony, so help me Allah. Till that happy day when with my mistress I unite shall be, then will I spend my good on lover wights, who are of my tribe and of the faith of me, and loose the very birds from jail set free, and change my grief for gladdest gree and glee. Then he went on to the third cage, wherein he found a mockingbird FN number 61, which, when it saw him, set up a song, and he recited the following couplets. Pleaseth me on hazard of mocking strain like voice of lover pained by love in vain. Woe's me for lovers! Ah, how many men by nights and pine and passion low are lain, as though by stress of love they had been made mournless and sleepless by their pain and bane. When I went daft for him who conquered me and pined for him who proved of proudest strain, my tears in streams down trickled, and I cried these long-linked tears bind like an adamant chain. Grew concupiscence, severance long, and I lost patience hordes, and grief waxed sovereign, if justice spied in world and me unite with him my love and Alavala stain, I'll strip my clothes that he my form shall sight with parting, distance, grief, how poor of plight. Then he went to the fourth cage, where he found a bulbul FN number 62, which, at sight of him, began to sway to and fro and sing its plaintive descant. And when he heard its complaint, he burst into tears and repeated these couplets. The bulbul's note, when as dawn is nigh, tells the lover from strains of strings to fly, complaineth for passion and al-wujud, for pine that would being to him deny. How many a strain do we hear, whose sound softens stones and the rock can mollify, and the breeze of morning that sweetly speaks of meadows in flowered greenery. and scents and sounds in the morning tide of birds and zephyrs in fragrance vie, but I think of one, of an absent friend, and tears rail like rain from a showery sky, and the flamy tongues in my breast uprise as sparks from gleed that in dark air fly. I'll deign vouchsafe to a lover distraught some day the face of his dear to descry. For lovers, indeed, no excuse is clear, save excuse of sight and excuse of eye. Then he walked on a little and came to a goodly cage, than which was no goodlier there, and in it a culver of the forest, that is to say, a wood pigeon, FN number 63, the bird renowned among birds as the minstrel of love longing, with a collar of jewels about its neck marvellous fine and fair. He considered it while and, seeing it absently brooding in its cage, he shed tears and repeated these couplets. O culver of copse, FN number 64, with salams I greet, O brother of lovers who woe must weet. I love a gazelle who is slender slim, whose glances for keenness the cimeter beat. For her love am my heart and my vitals a fire, and my frame consumes in love's fever heat. The sweet taste of food is unlawful for me, and forbidden is slumber, unlawfullest sweet. Endurance and solace have travelled from me, and love homes in my heart and grief takes firm seat. How shall life deal joy when they flee my sight who are joy and gladness and life and sprite? As soon as Ens al-Wujud had ended his verse, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 377th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that as soon as Ens al-Wujud had ended his verse, the wood culver awoke from its brooding and could reply to his lines and shrilled and trilled with its thrilling notes till it all but spake with human speech, FN number 65, and the tongue of the case talked for it and recited these couplets. O lover, thou bringest the thought to tide when the strength of my youth first faded and died, and a friend of whose form I was named, seductive and dight with beauty's pride, whose voice, as he sat on the sandhill tree, from the naze FN number 66, sweet sound turned my heart aside, a fowler snared him in net, the while oh that man would leave me at large. He cried, I had hoped he might somewhat of mercy show when a hapless lover he so espied, but Allah smite him who tore me away, in his hardness of heart, from my lover's side, but I my desire for him groweth more, and my heart with the fires of disjunction is fried. Allah guard a true lover, who strives with love, and hath borne the torments I still abide. And, seeing me bound in this cage, with mind of ruth, release me my love to find. Then Ens al-Wujud turned to his companion, the Ispahi, and said, What palace is this? Who built it and who abideth in it? Quoth the eunuch, There was ere of a certain king built it to guard his daughter, fearing for her the accidents of time and the incidents of fortune, and lodged her herein, her and her attendants, nor do we open it save once in every year, when their provision cometh to them. And Ens al-Wujud said to himself, I have gained my end, though I may have long to wait. Such was his case, but as regards Rosin Hood, of a truth she took no pleasure in eating or drinking, sitting or sleeping, but her desire and passion and distraction redoubled on her, and she went wandering about the castle corners, but could find no issue, wherefore she shed tears and recited these couplets. They have cruelly ta'en me from him, my beloved, and made me taste anguish in prison ta'en. They have fired my heart with the flames of love, barred all sight of him whom to see I'm fain. In a lofty palace they prisoned me on a mountain placed in the middle main. If they'd have me forget him, right vain's their wish, for my love is grown of the strongest train. How can I forget him whose face was cause of all I suffer, of all I plain? The whole of my days in sorrows spent, and in thought of him through the night I'm lain. Remembrance of him cheers my solitude, while I long of his presence and lone remain. But I knew if, after this all, my fate to oblige the desire of my here will deign. When her verses were ended, she ascended to the terrace roof of the castle after donning her richest clothes and trinkets and throwing a necklace of jewels around her neck. Then binding together some dresses of Baalbek FN number 67, stuffed by way of rope, she tied them to the crenels and let herself down thereby to the ground. And she fed on over wastes and waterless wilds, till she came to the shore, where she saw a fisherman plying here and there over the sea, for the wind had driven him onto the island. When he saw her, he was affrighted FN number 68, and pushed off again, flying from her, but she cried out and made pressing signs to him to return, versifying with these couplets. O fisherman, no care hast thou to fear, I'm but an earth-born maid in mortal sphere. I pray thee linger and my prayer grant, and to my true and happy tale give ear. Pity, so Allah spare thee, warmest love, say, hast thou seen him my beloved fair? I love a lovely youth whose face excels sunlight, and passes moon when clearest clear. The fawn, that sees his glance, is faint to cry I am his thrall, and own himself no peer. Beauty hath written, on his winsome cheek, rare lines of pregnant sense for every seer. Who sights the light of love his soul is saved, who strays as infidel to hell anear, and thou in mercy show his sight, O rare. FN number 69, thou shalt have every wish, the dearest dear, of rubies and what likest heart to them fresh pearls and unions new, the seashell's tear, my friend, thou wilt for sure grant my desire whose heart is melted in love's hottest fire. When the fisherman heard her words, he wept and made moan and lamented, then, recalling what had bettered himself in the days of his youth, when love had the mastery over him and longing and desire and distraction were sore upon him and the fires of passion consumed him, replied with these couplets. What fair excuse is this my pining plight, with wasted limbs and tears unceasing blight, and eyelids open in the nightly murk, and heart like fire stick FN number 70, ready fire to smite. Indeed love burdened us in early youth, and true from false coin soon we learned aright. Then did we sell our soul on way of love, and drunk of many a well FN number 71, to win her sight, venturing very life to gain her grace, and make high profit barreling a might. 'Tis love's religion, whoso buys with life his lover's grace, with highest gain is dight. And when he ended his verse, he moored his boat to the beach and said to her, Embark, so may I carry thee whither thou wilt. Thereupon she embarked and he put off with her, but they had not gone far from land, before there came out a stern wind upon the boat and drove it swiftly out of sight of shore. Now the fisherman knew not whither he went, and the strong wind blew without ceasing 3 days, when it fell by leave of Allah Almighty, and they sailed on and ceased not sailing till they came in sight of a city sitting upon the seashore. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 378th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the fisherman's craft, carrying Rosin Hood, made the city sitting upon the seashore, the man set about making fast to the land. Now the king of the city was a prince of Pith and Puissance named Dribers, the lion, and he chanced at that moment to be seated, with his son, at a window in the royal palace giving upon the sea, and happening to look out seawards, they saw the fishing boat make the land. They observed it narrowly and espied therein a young lady, as she were the full moon overhanging the horizon edge, with pendants in her ears of costly balass rubies and collar of precious stones about her throat. Hereby the king knew that this must indeed be the daughter of some king or great noble, and, going forth of the sea gate of the palace, went down to the boat, where he found the lady asleep and the fisherman busied in making fast to shore. So he went up to her and aroused her, whereupon she awoke, weeping, and he asked her, Whence comest thou, and whose daughter art thou, and what be the cause of thy coming hither? And she answered, I am the daughter of Ibrahim, Wazir to King Shamek, and the manner of my coming hither is wondrous and the cause thereof marvellous. And she told him her whole story first and last, hiding naught from him. Then she groaned aloud and recited these couplets. Teardrops have chafed mine eyelids and railed down in wondrous wise. for parting pain that fills my sprite and turns to springs mine eyes, for sake of friend whoever dwells within my vitals homed, and I may never win my wish of him in any guise. He hath a favour fair and bright, and brilliant is his face, which every Turk and Arab white in loveliness outvies, the sun and fullest moonlight lowen as his charms they sight, and lover-like they bend to him whene'er he deigneth rise. A wondrous spell of grammar like cold bedecks his e'en, and shows thee bow with shaft on string make ready ere it flies. O thou, to whom I told my case expecting all excuse, pity a lover white for whom love shafts such fate devise. Verily, love hath cast me on your coast despite of me of will now weak, and fain I trust mine honour thou wilt prize, for noble men, winners perchance alight upon their bounds, grace-worthy guests, confess their worth and raise to dignities. Then, O thou hope of me, to lovers folly will afford and be to them reunion cause, thou only leafest Lord. And when she had ended her verses, she again told the king her sad tale and shed plenteous tears and recited these couplets bearing on her case. We live till saw we all the marvels love can bear, each month to thee we hope shall fare as Raja Bethen number 72, fair, is it not wondrous, when I saw them march among that I with water o eyes in heart-lit flames that flare, that these mine eyelids rain fast dropping gouts of blood, that now my cheek grows gold where rose and lily were, as though the safflower hue, that overspread my cheeks, will Joseph's coat made stain of lying blood to wear. Now when the king heard her words he was certified of her love and longing and was moved to ruth for her, so he said to her, Fear nothing and be not troubled, thou hast come to the term of thy wishes, for there is no help but that I win for thee thy will and bring thee to thy desire. And he improvised these couplets. Daughter of nobles, who thy name shalt gain, hear gladdest news nor fear aught hurt of bane. This day I'll pack up wealth, and send it on to Shamick, guarded by a champion train. Fresh pods of musk I'll send him and brocades, and silver white and gold of yellow vein, yes, and a letter shall inform him meek that I have kinship with that king am fain, and I this day will lend thee bestest aid, that all thou covetest thy soul assain. I, too, have tasted love and know its taste and can excuse whoso the same cup drain. FN number 73. Then, ending his verse, he went forth to his troops and summoned his wazir, and, causing him to pack up countless treasure, commanded him carry it to King Shamick and say to him, Needs must thou send me a person named Uns-al-Wujud, and say moreover the king is minded to ally himself with thee by marrying his daughter to Uns-al-Wujud, thine officer. So there is no help but thou dispatch him to me, that the marriage may be solemnized in her father's kingdom. And he wrote a letter to King Shamick to this effect, and gave it to the minister, charging him strictly to bring back Uns-al-Wujud and warning him, and thou fail thou shalt be deposed and degraded. Answered the wazir, I hear and obey, and, setting out forthright with the treasures, in due course arrived at the court of King Shamick, whom he saluted in the name of King Dribbers and delivered the letter and the presents. Now when King Shamick read the letter and saw the name of Uns-al-Wujud, he burst into tears and said to the wazir, And where is Uns-al-Wujud? He went from us and we know not his place of abiding, only bring him to me, and I will give thee double the presents thou hast brought me. And he wept and groaned and lamented, saying these couplets. To me restore my dear, I want not wealth untold, nor crave I gifts of pearls or gems or store of gold. He was to us a moon in beauty's heavenly fold, passing in form and soul, with roe compare withhold. His form a willow wand, his fruit, laws manifold, but willow lacketh power men's hearts to have and hold. I reared him from a babe-born cot of coaxing rolled, and now I mourn for him with woe in soul ensouled. Then, turning to the wazir who had brought the presents and the missive, he said, Go back to thy liege and acquaint him that Uns-al-Wujud hath been missing this year past, and his lord knoweth not whither he is gone nor hath any tidings of him. Answered the minister of King Dribbers, O my lord, My master said to me, and thou fail to bring him back, thou shalt be degraded from the Wazirat and shall not enter my city. How then can I return without him? So King Shamek said to his Wazir Ibrahim, take a company and go with him and make ye search for Uns al-Wujud everywhere. He replied, hearkening and obedience, and, taking a body of his own retainers, set out accompanied by the Wazir of King Dribas seeking Uns al-Wujud. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 379th night, she said, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Ibrahim, Wazir to King Shamek, took him a body of his retainers and, accompanied by the minister of King Dribas, set out seeking Uns al-Wujud. And as often as they fell in with wild Arabs or others they asked of the youth, saying, tell us have ye seen a man whose name is so and his semblance thus and this? But they all answered, we know him not. Still they continued their quest, inquiring in city and hamlet and seeking in fertile plain and stony hall and in the wild and in the wold, till they made the mountain of the bereaved mother, and the Wazir of King Dribas said to Ibrahim, why is this mountain thus called? He answered, once of old time, here sojourned a Jinniya, of the Jinn of China, who loved a mortal with passionate love, and, being in fear of her life from her own people, searched all the earth over for a place, where she might hide him from them, till she happened on this mountain and, finding it cut off from both men and Jinn, there being no access to it, carried off her beloved and lodged him therein. There, when she could escape notice of her kith and kin, she used privily to visit him, and continued so doing till she had borne him a number of children, and the merchants, sailing by the mountain, in their voyages over the main, heard the weeping of the children, as it were the wailing of a woman bereft of her babes, and said, is there here a mother bereaved of her children? For which reason the place was named the Mountain of the Bereaved Mother. And the Wazir of King Dribas marvelled at his words. Then they landed and, making for the castle, knocked at the gate which was opened to them by an eunuch, who knew the Wazir Ibrahim and kissed his hands. The minister entered and found in the courtyard, among the serving men, a fakir, which was Uns al-Wujud, but he knew him not and said, whence cometh yond a wight? Quoth they, he is a merchant, who hath lost his goods, but saved himself, and he is an ecstatic. FN number 74. So there Wazir left him and went on into the castle, where he found no trace of his daughter and questioned her women, who answered, we wot not how or whither she went, this place misliked her and she tarried in it but a short time. Whereupon he wept sore and repeated these couplets. Ho thou, the house, whose birds were singing gay, whose sills their wealth and pride were wont display. Till came the lover wailing for his love, and found thy doors wide open to the way. Would heaven I knew where is my soul that erst was homed in house, whose owners fared away. 'Twas stored with all things bright and beautiful, and showed its porters ranged in fair array. They clothed it with brocades a bride become. FN number 75. Would I knew whither went its lords, say. After ending his verses he again shed tears, and groaned and bemoaned himself, exclaiming, there is no deliverance from the destiny decreed by Allah, nor is there any escape from that which he hath predestined. Then he went up to the roof and found the strips of Baalbak stuff tied to the crenelles and hanging down to the ground, and thus it was he knew that she had descended thence and had fled forth, as one distracted and demented with desire and passion. Presently, he turned and seeing the two birds, a cock-crow and an owl, he justly deemed this an omen of ill, so he groaned and recited these couplets. I came to my dear friend's door, of my hopes the goal, whose sight mote assuage my sorrow and woes of soul. No friends found either, nor was there another thing to find, save a corby crow and an ill-omened owl. And the tongue o'er the case to me seemed to say, indeed this parting two lovers fond was cruel and foul. So taste thou the sorrow thou madest them taste, and live in grief, when thy ways and now in thy sorrow prowl. Then he descended from the castle roof, weeping, and bade the servants fare forth and search the mount for their mistress. So they sought for her, but found her not. Such was the case, but as regards Uns al-Wujud, when he was certified that Rosin Hood was indeed gone, he cried with a great cry and fell down in a fainting fit, nor came to himself for a long time, whilst the folk deemed that his spirit had been withdrawn by the compassionating one, and that he was absorbed in contemplation of the splendour, majesty and beauty of the requiting one. Then, despairing of finding Uns al-Wujud, and seeing that their Wazir Ibrahim was distracted for the loss of his daughter, the minister of King Dribas addressed himself to return to his own country, albeit he had not attained the object of his journey, and while bidding his companion adieu, said to him, I have a mind to take the fakir with me. It may be Allah Almighty will incline the king's heart to me by his blessing, for that he is a holy man, and thereafter, I will send him to Ispahan, which is near our country. Do as thou wilt, answered Ibrahim. So they took leave of each other and departed, each for his own motherland. There was Wazir of King Dribas carrying with him Uns al-Wujud, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 380th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that there was Wazir of King Dribas carried with him Uns al-Wujud, who was still insensible. They bore him with them on mubarak, he unknowing if he were carried or not, for 3 days, when he came to himself and said, Where am I? Thou art in company with the minister of King Dribas, replied they, and went and gave news of his recovering to the Wazir, who sent him rose water and sherbet of sugar, of which they gave him to drink and restored him. Then they ceased not faring on till they drew near King Dribas's capital, and the king, being advised of his Wazir's coming, wrote to him, saying, If Uns al-Wujud be not with thee, come not to me ever. Now when the Wazir read the royal mandate, it was grievous to him, for he knew not that Rosin Hood was with the king, nor why he had been sent in quest of Uns al-Wujud, nor the king's reason for desiring the alliance, whilst Uns al-Wujud also knew not whither they were bearing him, or that the Wazir had been sent in quest of him, nor did the Wazir know that the fakir he had with him was Uns al-Wujud himself. And when the minister saw that the sick man was whole, he said to him, I was dispatched by the king on an errand, which I have not been able to accomplish. So, when he heard of my return, he wrote to me, saying, Except thou have fulfilled my need, enter not my city. And what is the king's need? Asked Uns al-Wujud. So the Wazir told him the whole tale, and he said, Fear nothing, but go boldly to the king and take me with thee, and I will be surety to thee for the coming of Uns al-Wujud. At this the Wazir rejoiced and cried, Is this true which thou sayest? Yes, replied he, whereupon the Wazir mounted and carried him to King Dribas, who, after receiving their salutations, said to him, Where is Uns al-Wujud? Answered the young man, O king, I know where he is. So the king called him to him and said, Where? Returned Uns al-Wujud, He is near hand and very near, but tell me what thou wouldest with him, and I will fetch him unto thy presence. The king replied, With joy and good gree, but the case calleth for privacy. So he ordered the folk to withdraw, and, carrying Uns al-Wujud into his cabinet, told him the whole story, whereupon quoth the youth, Robe me in rich raiment, and I will forthright bring Uns al-Wujud to thee. So they brought him a sumptuous dress, and he donned it and said, I am Uns al-Wujud, the world's delight, and to the envious a despite. And presently he smote with his glances every sprite, and began these couplets to recite. My loved one's name in cheerless solitude aye cheereth me, and driveth off my desperance and despondency. I have no helper. FN number 76, but my tears that ever flow in fount, and as they flow, they lighten woe and force my grief to flee. My longing is so violent, naught like it there was seen. My love tale is a marvel, and my love a sight to see. I spend the night with lids of eye that never close in sleep, and pass in passion twixt the hells and Eden's heavenly. I had of patience fairish store, but now no more have I, and love's sole gift to me hath been aye growing misery. My frame is wasted by the pain of parting from my own, and longing changed my shape and form and made me other be. Mine eyelids by my torrent tears are chafed, and ulcerate, the tears, whose flow to stay is mere impossibility. My manly strength is sore impaired, for I have lost my heart. How many griefs upon my griefs have I been doomed to dree? My heart and head are like in age with similar hoariness by loss of beauty's lord. FN number 77, of Lords the Galaxy. Despite our wills they parted us and doomed us parted one, while they, our lords, desire no more than love in unity. Then would heaven that what if stress of parting done, the world will grant me sight of them in union fain and free roll up the scroll of severance which others would unroll, efface my trouble by the grace of meeting's jubilee. And shall I see them homed with me in cup company, and change my melancholic mood for joy and jollity? And when he had ended his verses, the king cried aloud, By Allah, ye are indeed a pair of lovers true and fain, and in beauty's heaven of shining stars twain. Your story is wondrous and your case marvellous. Then he told him all that had befalled Rose in Hood, and Ens al-Wujud said, Where is she, O king of the age? She is with me now, answered Dribbles, and, sending for the Qazi and the witnesses, drew up the contract of marriage between her and him. Then he honoured Ens al-Wujud with favours and bounties, and sent to King Shamek acquainting him with what had befallen, whereat this king joyed with exceeding joy, and wrote back the following purport. Since the ceremony of contract hath been performed at thy court, it behoveth that the marriage and its consummation be at mine. Then he made ready camels, horses and men, and sent them in quest of the bear, and when the embassy reached King Dribbers, he gave the lovers much treasure and dispatched them to King Shamek's court with a company of his own troops. The day of their arrival was a notable day, never was seen a grander, for the king gathered together all the singing women and players on instruments of music, and made wedding banquets and held high festival 7 days, and on each day he gave largesse to the folk and bestowed on them sumptuous robes of honour. Then Ens al-Wujud went into Rose in Hood, and they embraced and sat weeping for excess of joy and gladness, whilst she recited these couplets. Joyance is come, dispelling cark and care, we are united, envies may despair. The breeze of union blows, in quickening forms, hearts and vitals, fresh with fragrant air, the splendour of delight with scents appears, and round us FN number 78, flags and drums show gladness rare. Deem not we're weeping for our stress of grief, it is for joy our tears as torrents fair. How many fears we've seen that now are past, and bore we patient what was sore to bear. 1 hour of joyance made us both forget what from excess of terror greyed our hair. And when the verses were ended, they again embraced and ceased not from their embrace, till they fell down in a swoon, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 381st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Ens al-Wujud and Rose in Hood embraced when they foregathered and ceased not from their embrace, till they fell down in a swoon for the delight of reunion, and when they came to themselves, Ens al-Wujud recited these couplets. How joyously sweet are the nights that unite, when my dealing deigns keep me the troth she did plight, when union conjoins us in all that we have, and parting is severed and sundered from sight. To us comes the world with her favour so fair, after frown and aversion and might despite, hath planted her ban a good fortune for us, and we drink of her cup in the purest delight. We have met and complained of the pitiful past, and of nights a full many that doomed us to blight. But now, O my lady, the past is forgot, the compassionate pardon the past for unright. How sweet is existence! How glad is to be! This union my passion doth only incite. And when he ended his verses they once more embraced, drowned in the sea of passion, and lay down together in the private apartment carousing and conversing and quoting verses and telling pleasant tales and anecdotes. On this wise 7 days passed over them whilst they knew not night from day, and it was to them, for very stress of gaiety and gladness, pleasure and possession, as if the 7 days were but one day with ne'er a morrow. Not did they know the 7th day, FN number 79, but by the coming of the singers and players on instruments of music, whereat Rosenhood beyond measure wondered and improvised these couplets. In spite of envy's jealousy, at end we have won all we hoped of the friend. We've crowned our meeting with a close embrace on quilts where new brocades with sandal blend, on bed of perfumed leather, which the spoils of downy birds luxuriously distend. But I abstain me from unneeded wine, when honeydews of lips sweet musk can lend. Now from the sweets of union we are no time near and far, if slow or fast it went. The 7th night hath come and gone, oh strange! How went the nights we never recked or kenned, till, on the 7th wishing joy they said, Allah prolonged the meet of friend with friend. When she had finished her song, and Al-Wujud kissed her, more than 100 times, and recited these couplets. O day of joys to either lover fain! The loved one came and freed from a lonely pain. She blessed me with all inner charms she hath, and companied within a grace deep plain. She made me drain the wine of love till I was faint with joys her love had made me drain. We toyed and joyed and on each other lay, then fell to wine and soft melodious strain, and for excess of joyance never knew how went the day and how it came again. Fair fall each lover, may he union win and gain of joy like me the amplest gain, nor weet the taste of severance bitter fruit, and joys assain them as they are sustain. Then they went forth and distributed to the folk alms and presents of money and raiment and rare gifts and other tokens of generosity, after which Rosenhood bade clear the bath for her FN number 80, and, turning to Al-Wujud, said to him, O coolth of my eyes, I have a mind to see thee in the hammam, and therein we will be alone together. He joyfully consented to this, and she let scent the hammam with all sorts of perfumed woods and essences, and light the wax candles. Then of the excess of her contentment she recited these couplets. O who didst win my love in other date, and present ere must speak of past estate, and, O, who art my sole sufficiency, nor want I other friends with me to mate, come to the hammam, O my light of eyes, and enter Eden through Jeffna gate. We'll scent with ambergris and aloes wood till float the heavy clouds with fragrant freight, and to the world he'll pardon all her sins and sue for mercy the compassionate, and I will cry, when I descry thee there, good cheer, sweet love, all blessings on thee wait. FN number 81. Whereupon they arose and fared to the bath and took their pleasure therein, after which they returned to their palace and there abode in the fullness of enjoyment, till there came to them the destroyer of delights and the sunderer of societies, and glory be to him who changeth not neither ceaseth, and to whom everything returneth. And they also tell a tale of Abu Nawas with the 3 boys and the Caliph Harun al-Rashid. FN number 82. Abu Nawas one day shut himself up and, making ready a richly furnished feast, collected for it meats of all kinds and of every colour that lips and tongue can desire. Then he went forth, to seek a minion worthy of such entertainment, saying, Allah, my Lord and my Master, I beseech thee to send me one who befitteth this banquet and who is fit to carouse with me this day. Hardly had he made an end of speaking when he espied 3 youths handsome and beardless, as they were of the boys of paradise. FN number 83. Differing in complexion but fellows in incomparable beauty, and all hearts yearned with desire to the swaying of their bending shapes, even to what saith the poet. I passed a beardless pair without compare and cried, I love you, both you furly fur. Moneyed? Quoth one, quoth I, and lavish too. Then said the fair bear, prayer, is not a fair. Now Abu Nawas was given to these joys and loved to sport and make merry with fair boys and cull the rose from every brightly blooming cheek, even as saith the bard. Full many a reverend sheikh feels sting of flesh, loves pretty faces, shows at pleasure's depot, awakes in Mosul. FN number 84. land of purity, and all the daydreams only of Aleppo. FN number 85. So he accosted them with the salutation, and they returned his greeting with civility and all honour, and would have gone their several ways, but he stayed them, repeating these couplets. Steer ye your steps to none but me, who hath a mine of luxury old wine that shines with brightest blee, made by the monk in monastery, and mutton meat the toothsomest, and birds of all variety. Then eat of these and drink of those old wines that bring you jollity, and have each other, turn by turn, shampooing this my tool you see. FN number 86. Thereupon the youths were beguiled by his verses and consented to his wishes, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 382nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Abu Nawas beguiled the youths with his wishes, saying, We hear and obey, and accompanied him to his lodging, where they found already that he had set forth in his couplets. They sat down and ate and drank and made merry a while, after which they appealed to Abu Nawas to decide which of them was handsomest of face and shapeliest of form. So he pointed to one of them and, having kissed him twice over, recited the following verses. I'll ransom that beauty spot with my soup, where's it and where is a money dole? FN number 87. Praise him who hairless hath made that cheek and bit beauty bide in that mole, that mole. Then he pointed to another and, kissing his lips, repeated these couplets. And levelling weareth on his cheek a mole like musk, which virgin Campanelle lets off it, my peepers marvel such a contrast seeing, and cried the mole to me, Now bless the Prophet. FN number 88. Then he pointed to the third and, after kissing him half a score times, repeated these couplets. Melted pure gold in silvern bowl to drain the youth, whose fingers wore a winey stain, he withdraws. FN number 89, served 1 cup of wine, and served his wandering eyes the other twain. A levelling of the sons of Turks. FN number 90, a phone whose waist conjoins the double mounts Honain. FN number 91, Khedive's corrupting doors. FN number 92, tempt my heart content with twofold loot I'd bear the bane. And to derive back, made land. FN number 93, this one laws, that laws to 2 mosque cities of the plain. FN number 94. Now each of the youths had drunk 2 cups, and when it came to the turn of Abu Nawas, he took the goblet and repeated these couplets. Drink not strong wine save at the slender dealing's hand, each like to other in all gifts the spirit grace. The wine can never gladden Topa's heart and soul, unless the cup boy show a bright and sparkling face. Then he drank off his cup and the bowl went round, and when it came to Abu Nawas again, joyance got the mastery of him, and he repeated these couplets. For cup friends cup succeeding cup a sign, brimming with grape juice, brought in endless line, by hand of brown-lipped. FN number 95. Beauty who is sweet at wake as apple or musk finest fine. FN number 96, drink not the wine except from hand of fawn whose cheek to kiss is sweeter than the wine. Presently the drink got into his noddle, drunkenness mastered him and he knew not hand from head, so that he lolled from side to side in joy and inclined to the youths one and all, anon kissing them and anon embracing them leg over lying leg. And he showed no sense of sin or shame, but recited these couplets. None wotteth best joyance a generous youth when the pretty ones deign with him company keep. This sings to him that, when he wants a pick-me-up. FN number 97, lying there all of a heap, and when of a loveling he needeth a kiss, he takes from his lips or a draught or a nip. Heaven bless them. How sweetly my day with them sped. A wonderful harvest of pleasure I reap. Let us drink our good liquor both watered and pure, and agree to swive all who dare slumber and sleep. While they were in this debauched state, behold, there came a knocking at the door, so they bade him who knocked enter, and behold, it was the commander of the faithful, Harun al-Rashid. When they saw him, they all rose and kissed ground before him, and Abu Nawas threw off the fumes of the wine for awe of the Caliph, who said to him, "Holla, Abu Nawas." He replied, "Adsum, at thy service, O Commander of the Faithful, whom Allah preserve." The Caliph asked, "What state is this?" And the poet answered, "O Prince of True Believers, my state indubitably dispenseth with questions." Quoth the Caliph, "O Abu Nawas, I have sought direction of Allah Almighty and have appointed thee Qazi of pimps and pandas." Asked he, "Dost thou indeed invest me with that high office, O Commander of the Faithful?" And the Caliph answered, "I do," whereupon Abu Nawas rejoined, "O Commander of the Faithful, hast thou any suit to prefer to me?" Hereat the Caliph was wroth and presently turned away and left them, full of rage, and passed the night sore and angered against Abu Nawas, who amid the party he had invited spent the merriest of nights and the jolliest and joyousest. And when daybreak dawned and the star of morn appeared in sheen and shone, he broke up the sitting and, dismissing the youths, donned his court dress and leaving his house set out for the palace of the Caliph. Now it was the custom of the Commander of the Faithful, when the divan broke up, to withdraw to his sitting saloon and summon thither his poets and cup companions and musicians, each having his own place, which he might not overpass. So it happened that day, he retired to his saloon, and the friends and familiars came and seated themselves, each in his rank and degree. Presently, in walked Abu Nawas and was about to take his usual seat, when the Caliph cried to Masrur, the sworder, and bade him strip the poet of his clothes and bind an ass's pack saddle on his back and a halter about his head and a crupper under his rump and lead him round to all the lodgings of the slave girls. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 383rd night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious King, that the Caliph commanded Masrur, the sworder, to strip Abu Nawas of his court suit and bind an ass's pack saddle on his back and a halter about his head, and a crupper under his rump, and lead him round to all the lodgings of the slave girls, and the chambers of the harem, that the women might make mock of him, then cut off his head and bring it to him." Hearkening and obedience, replied Masrur, and, doing with Abu Nawas as the Caliph has bidden him, led him round all the chambers whose number equalled the days of the year. But Abu Nawas was a funny fellow, so he made all the girls laugh with his buffooneries, and each gave him something whereby he returned not save with a pocketful of money. And while this was going on, behold, Ja'far the Barmecide, who had been absent on an important business for the Commander of the Faithful, entered, and recognizing the poet, albeit in this plight, said to him, "Holla, Abu Nawas." He said, "Here at thy service, O our Lord." Ja'far asked, "What offence hast thou committed to bring this punishment on thee?" Thereupon he answered, "None whatsoever, except that I made our Lord the Caliph a present of the best of my poetry, and he presented me, in return, with the best of his raiment." When the Prince of True Believers heard this, he laughed, from a heart full of wrath, FN number 98, and pardoned Abu Nawas, and also gave him a myriad of money. And they also recount the tale of Abdullah bin Amama with the man of Bassora and his slave girl. A certain man of Bassora once bought a slave girl and reared and educated her right well. Moreover, he loved her very dearly and spent all his substance in pleasuring and merry-making with her, till he had naught left and extreme poverty was sore upon him. So she said to him, "O my master, sell me, for thou needest my price, and it maketh my heart ache to see thy sorry and wantful plight. If thou then me make use of my value, 'twill be better for thee than keeping me by thee, and haply Almighty Allah will ample thee and amend thy fortune." He agreed to this for the straightness of his case, and carried her to the bazaar, where the broker offered her for sale to the governor of Bassora, by name Abdullah bin Mamma al-Taymi, and she pleased him. So he bought her, for 500 dinars, and paid the sum to her master. But when he booked the money and was about to go away, the girl burst into tears and repeated these two couplets. May coins thou gainest joy in heart instill, for me remaineth naught save sadder still. I say unto my soul which sorely grieves, thy friend departeth and thou will known ill. And when the master heard this, he groaned and replied in these couplets. Albeit this thy case lack all resource, nor findeth aught but death's doom, pardon still, evening and morning, thoughts of thee will dole comfort to heart all woes and griefs fulfill, peace be upon thee. Meet we now no more nor pair except at Ibn Mamma's will. Now when Abdullah bin Mamma heard these verses and saw their affection, he exclaimed, By Allah, I will not assist fate in separating you, for it is evident to me that ye two indeed love each other. So take the money and the damsel, O man, and Allah bless thee in both, for verily parting be grievous to lovers. So they kissed his hand and going away, ceased not to dwell together, till death did them part, and glory be to him whom death overtaketh not. And amongst stories is that of the lovers of the Banu FN number 99, Aura. There was once, among the Banu Aura, a handsome and accomplished man, who was never a single day out of love, and it chanced that he became enamored of a beauty of his own tribe and sent her many messages, but she ceased not to entreat him with cruelty and disdain, till, the stress of love and longing and desire and distraction, he fell sick of a sore sickness and took to his pillow and murdered sleep. His malady redoubled on him and his torments increased and he was well nigh dead when his case became known among the folk and his passion notorious. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased to say her permitted say. When it was the 384th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the man took to his pillow and murdered sleep. So his case became known and his passion notorious, and his infirmity grew upon him and his pains redoubled until he was well nigh dead. His family and hers were urgent with her to visit him, but she refused, till he was at the point of death when, being told of this, she relented towards him and vouchsafed him a visit. As soon as he saw her, his eyes ran over with tears and he repeated from a broken heart, An, by thy life, pass thee my funeral train, a bier upborne upon the necks of four, wilt thou not follow it, and greet the grave where shall my corpse be graved forevermore? Hearing this, she wept with sore weeping and said to him, By Allah, I suspected not that passion had come to such a pass with thee, as to cast thee into the arms of death. Had I wist of this, I had been favourable to thy wish, and thou shouldst have had thy will. At this his tears streamed down even as the clouds rail rain, and he repeated this verse. She drew near when as death was departing us, and deemed union grant when 'twas useless all. Then he groaned one groan and died. So she fell on him, kissing him and weeping and ceased not weeping until she swooned away, and when she came to herself, she charged her people to bury her in his grave and with streaming eyes recited these two couplets. We lived on earth a life of fair content, and tribe and house and home of us were proud, but time in whirling flight departed us, to join us now in womb of earth and shroud. FN number 100. Then she fell again to weeping, nor gave over shedding tears and lamenting till she fainted away, and she lay 3 days, senseless. Then she died and was buried in his grave. This is one of the strange chances of love. FN number 101, and I have heard related a tale of there Wazir of Al-Yaman and his young brother. It is said that Badr al-Din, Wazir of Al-Yaman, had a young brother of singular beauty and kept straight watch over him, so he applied himself to seek a tutor for him and, coming upon a sheikh of dignified and reverend aspect, chaste and religious, lodged him in a house next his own. This lasted a long time, and he used to come daily from his dwelling to that of Sahib FN number 102, Badr al-Din, and teach the young brother. After a while, the old man's heart was taken with love for the youth, and longing grew upon him and his vitals were troubled, till one day, he bemoaned his case to the boy, who said, What can I do, seeing that I may not leave my brother night or day? and thou thyself say'st how careful he is over me. Quoth the Sheikh, my lodging adjoineth thine, so there will be no difficulty, when thy brother sleepeth, to rise and, entering the privy, feign thyself to sleep. Then come to the parapet FN number 103 of the terrace roof, and I will receive thee on the other side of the wall. So shalt thou sit with me a night twinkling and return without thy brother's knowledge. I hear and obey, answered the lad, and the tutor began to prepare gifts suitable to his degree. Now when a while of the night was past, he entered the water closet and waited until his brother lay down on his bed and took patience till he was drowned in sleep, when he rose and going to the parapet of the terrace roof, found standing there to await him the old man, who gave him his hand and carried him to the sitting chamber, where he had made ready various dainties for his entertainment, and they sat down to carouse. Now it was the night of the full moon, and, as they sat with a wine cup going round, her rays shone upon them, and the governor fell to singing. But, whilst they were thus enjoying jollity and mirth and merriment, such as confoundeth the wit and the sight and defieth description, lo! The wazir awoke and, missing his brother, arose in a fright and found the door open. So he went up to the roof and hearing a noise of talk, climbed over the parapet to the adjoining terrace and saw a light shining from the lodging. He looked in from behind the wall, and espied his brother and his tutor sitting at carouse, but the sheikh became aware of him and sang cup in hand, to a lively measure these couplets. He made me drain his wine of honeyed lips, toasting with cheeks which rose and myrtle smother, then nighted in embrace, cheek to my cheek, a loveling midst mankind without another. When the full moon arose on us and shone, pray she traduce us not to the big brother. And it proved the perfect politeness of the Wazir Badr al-Din that, when he heard this, he said, by Allah, I will not betray you. And he went away and left them to their diversions. They also tell a tale concerning the loves of the boy and girl at school. A free boy and a slave girl once learned together in school, and the boy fell passionately in love with a girl. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. When it was the 385th night, she said, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the lad fell passionately in love with a slave lass. So one day, when the other boys were heedless, he took her tablet FN number 104, and wrote on it these two couplets. What sayest thou of him by sickness waste, until he's clean distraught for love of thee, who in the transport of his pain complains, nor can bear load of heart in secrecy. Now when the girl took her tablet, she read the verses written thereon, and understanding them, wept for ruth of him. Then she wrote thereunder these two couplets. And if we behold a love for and desiring us, our favours he shall see, yea, what he wills of us he shall obtain, and so befall us what befalling be.